Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome to the show. It's been a little while since I've been on here. There hasn't been too much content forthcoming with the Darth Dawkins drama on Discord and such. Tom Rabbit's been kind of laying low. He actually posted, if anybody's interested, Tom Rabbit's channel. He actually put a video out, kind of giving an update as to what happened and kind of a quick synopsis of things that went down. Him getting removed from politics and religion, and kind of having a behind-the-scenes chat with some of the mods there, and then. Wherever Darth Dawkins has ended up, but Darth Dawkins has joined. I think this is the social media app called Clubhouse, which is kind of like a pared down version of. Well, maybe it's not. I don't know what the functionality is, but as Tom Rabbit has described it, it's kind of like the stages that Discord offers. But from my understanding of Clubhouse, it's kind of limited to that. Anyway. So Tom was nice enough, or at least someone was nice enough, to record this little snippet. This isn't a very long video. It's about 14 minutes. There's a conversation going on between a couple Christians, theists, whatever, at the beginning, and Darth steps in to kind of just make sure that Christianity is not too much fun, because you don't want people getting too whimsical about it, too fanciful. And a couple of things get pointed out that are a little weird. And I was kind of interested in the second point that I'm going to be making. It's a point that Darth makes, kind of important to Christians. It's a little piece of trivia that I kind of like to point out. It drives a lot of theists nuts, specifically Christians, makes them nuts. Probably doesn't get pointed out enough. Anyways, I'm going to get started with that one. I'm probably going to go through this one a little on the quicker side, and then we're going to get into the second video is a Malpass video from 2017. Alex Malpass had a conversation with Darth Dawkins. I believe this video is the first extended conversation that they had together, and it was during a Google Hangouts thing. So this is back in the days of tablets and chisels and stuff. But they have an exchange for about 50 minutes or so. So I'm going to kind of go through that one. There's not too much new ground in there, but there is some kind of interesting stuff and kind of exchanges. What's interesting is to see that even with a guy like Malpass, he's from the UK, he has a background in analytical philosophy, did a really good job of dismantling Matt Slick's transcendental argument for God. Darth Dawkins just kind of sticks with his usual kind of ambiguously worded arguments, and then his crappy behavior and his obnoxious personality. He just kind of leans into that. And so really no big shift, even since 2017. So we'll be getting to that one a little bit later. Anyway, I'm going to get this one started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Let's see. Mickey D. Hello. Maya Atkinson. Hello. How are you doing? JC Knott. I think you were first. Thanks for showing up. Michael Deaton. Enrique. I'm glad you were here. And special thanks to Enrique. He was the one that was kind of, I don't want to say badgering. That sounds bad. But he kept reminding me to do the video, to do a review of this Malpass video, and sent me the link for it. And that's kind of what prompted me to do it. If you want me to start feeling guilty, if you email me a link to a video, and it is one that I'm interested in, I will probably obsess over it until I finally get around to doing a video on it. So Scott Duke, thanks for showing up. If I forgot anybody, my apologies. I think that's everybody. Oh, and God equals the square root of -1. Thanks for showing up. So I'm going to jump into this now. And as usual, if there's any audio issues or anything like that, just yell and let me know. Oh, hello, Daddy Smoke. Okay, here we go. Is there no sound going through? I'm wondering. Let's see. Mine's working fine. Let me take a look and see what's going on. Oh, it's just very, very quiet. Oh, well, it would help if I would share it. That was supposed to go through. That was weird. That dropped it. I got too many tabs open. I'm losing my mind. All right. All right. Let's rewind that back. Okay. Let's try this again, folks. Apologies for that. Here we go.
Hey, YouTube out there. Tom Rabbit likes to record these. Hey, Tom Rabbit.
Like, I think God's law is genuinely in the Bible, but, you know, the way that it has politically been curated, the way that we even have our English translations might not ultimately, you know, be the translations from the original language that it was in. Like, this is a different, like, structuring of language too. You know, there's this ultimate debate about the Bible between, like, there's a verse, and I'm sorry that I can't really tell you exactly what book it's in, but, you know, like, it's an abomination to lay with another man. And I mean, then that's like, you know, we've, like, I guess, you know, now more so related it to, like, gay marriage and, you know, whether or not that's, like, ethical in the Bible. But I mean, there's a debate with historians asking, like, maybe the translation meant pedophilia, and, like, the closest word in our language was was man in our language. And so, like, there are these small things that, you know, when we, like, switch to, like, a Gregorian English, that might just deserve, like just a little more more of a lens, I guess, and just more emphasis and time to just really translate and think about what certain things mean. But I do think I absolutely understand what you're saying, and thank you for sharing. And I'd love to hear any response.
None of all of the many English translations that are done by many different organizations reflect what you just said. Okay.
Okay. So that's
as far as organizations, what he's talking about. So she's bringing up, I believe, the part from Leviticus 18 where it talks about, you know, if a man lies with another man, this is an abomination. They are to be put to death. When she's talking about, I think she's probably heard about, I don't know how many scholars are kind of into this, but there is one. His name is Idan Dershowitz. Idan is spelled I-D-A-N. And he is a Harvard educated. I think he's a Harvard fellow. I don't know. Maybe he didn't go to Harvard, but he is the head of Hebrew studies, I believe, and Hebrew exegetical studies at the University of Potsdam. So he's not a slouch. And he has kind of an interesting theory. You can actually pull it up. I think, I can't remember if he posted it in the Washington Post or the New York Times. I think it was in the New York Times back in about 2018. He posted one of his kind of an explanation as to why he thought that there were things being placed in Leviticus was being changed, that maybe there was actually a early cultural tolerance towards homosexuality, and what was happening with Leviticus was a little bit of an edit. Dr. Josh Bowen has covered this several times. I don't know if Dr. Josh Bowen is convinced that is actually the case, or I think he's said that that's not really academic consensus or anything, but it is an interesting hypothesis that Dershowitz has put out. And I think that's kind of where she's going with this. Naturally, that's one of those kinds of hypotheses that Darth Dawkins is going to hate. So he's just like, no church would ever look into it like that. And he's kind of right. A lot of churches probably wouldn't. But, you know, you could go to, you know, biblical scholars, Hebrew scholars, to find out what the issues are about how to translate and exegete books like Leviticus.
I think that's honestly like the thing I'm talking about, English translation. Like, it's a different framework that we kind of.
Yeah, these people are Hebrew scholars. Okay. Now, we might favor one translation than other. There's no perfect translation, but you're suggesting maybe, possibly, but I bet you're not even familiar. Okay.
I always like it when these guys are willing to acknowledge that the people that translate the Bible are scholars themselves, and generally that is true. And they are scholars who have trained to read and translate Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, and Koine Greek and Aramaic, and they hopefully have some studies in some other languages as well. You know, the ancient Near Eastern studies and stuff like that. Until you get somebody who ends up wanting to tell you semantically that slavery doesn't mean slavery. which is weird. So these people are scholars translating these languages into English best they can. But when they had to pick a word like slavery, not to take this down to the old slavery in the Bible tangent, but it's like, okay, well, why did they pick that word when they could use something like debt slavery or indentured servitude more consistently? Then all of a sudden, the best scholar is the apologist looking to defend, the Bible from these uncomfortable questions from skeptics and atheists.
With the Bible. What's the fifth book in the New Testament?
Here we go.
Actually, so this is exactly why.
What is the fifth book in the New Testament?
Absolutely. So this is why I actually joined this discussion, because I
what is the fifth book in the New Testament?
See, and this is becoming dogmatic.
No, I'm not dogmatic. I'm asking you a legitimate question. You're making assertions about the nature of the Bible and translation. I asked you a question. I'll repeat the question. What is the fifth book in the New Testament?
You have to answer.
I do not know, but
okay.
So you have to answer that question. You can't just. I'm surprised. This might be Darth Dawkins at his best behavior here, because he asked her 4 or 5 times, and you could hear maybe his blood pressure kicking up just a little bit, but he didn't automatically jump into frothing rage like he was doing on some of the servers he was haunting on Discord. So I think maybe he's trying to he's pacing himself a little bit here. But she doesn't know that the fifth book of the Bible is Acts. So watch Darth then essentially implicitly conclude that she therefore knows nothing about the Bible.
Okay, so you are speaking out of complete ignorance about the Bible.
I am not speaking out of complete ignorance. Not complete ignorance, no.
Okay, is Second Hezekiah in the Old Testament, the New Testament, or the Apocrypha?
I can't tell you, but
of course you know why? Because it doesn't exist.
No, but Darth,
you know what? Hold on a second. I'm confronting you that you're just making up this stuff that you're saying, and that you don't know anything about the Bible. Real quick?
Wait,
you can wait a second.
She acknowledged Leviticus. She acknowledged that she wasn't totally up to snuff on this stuff, and she'd heard these kinds of things. And she's acknowledging that she's aware that scholars have raised issues with linguistics and translation, and those aren't unimportant issues when it comes, even amongst believers. But because she's brought up something that Darth objects to, now he's going to make sure that everyone knows that she must be completely ignorant of the Bible. You can't be completely ignorant of the Bible if you just brought up, if you can name at least one book in the Bible, and she did, Leviticus, you're not totally ignorant of it.
You're just saying, well, it could have been pedophilia. Well, then why is it that none of the English translators who have degrees in ancient Hebrew, translated it that way?
I think that, we're revisiting this, and,
so you made an unfounded speculation that's without support.
I think that I actually...
Most of what she was doing was throwing out the idea that that the hypothesis is possible that this was what was going on. I don't know that I've ever heard one about Leviticus saying that what they were actually objecting to was pedophilia. I've heard that being used for, I believe it's the part in 1 Corinthians where they're talking about when, what's it? The Greek word is arsenokoitai or something like that, and it gets translated into sodomite or something like that. And that probably isn't accurate. The Greek term is more like a kind of roughly translates to like quote unquote softy or something like that. It's basically a guy who was a little too promiscuous, right? And they think it might have been guys that spent time with like temple prostitutes, which could be, young or adolescent males. And so with that one, there's quite a bit of debate about where that, what Paul's actually condemning, even though I think given like Paul's views towards marriage, it wouldn't be difficult to see like he's also against homosexuality. He didn't want men and women getting married either. Right. Like, unless it was good for him, right? Like they shouldn't turn into like one of these guys that's lingering around temple prostitutes. Better to get married and have a wife and, a steady home life, that kind of thing. So, so Darth is automatically trying to pigeonhole this in a weird way. And this is somebody who is, unless he hasn't been paying attention to this conversation, he's humped himself to it, at least at this point. She is attempting to explore more Christianity.
Theo was actually really amazing with this. When you left, I opened up about, wanting to very much rejuvenate my Christianity. And
you're not a Christian, ma'am.
So this is exactly what I was talking about with Theo. How it's really, I'm trying to learn more, and I'm trying to have these open, and I'm trying to have these open discussions. And
when did you come? All right, let me ask you a question. When did you come to the point in your life where you realized that you were going to hell for eternity?
I never actually came to that point because
Then you're not a Christian then.
Hold on,
No,
wait
but-
a minute.
but
wait a
see,
minute.
Darth-
See, this is kind of odd. So Darth has actually laid out a claim here, and this is kind of a weird theological one, at least for me. This seems like the old fire and brimstone kind of thing. If you didn't get to a point subjectively in your mind where you were aware of the very real terror that awaits you upon death, the eternal position of your soul in a place of eternal conscious torment, then you can't be a Christian, according to Darth. Now, the very easy thing for him to do here, and this is him picking on people that I don't think have probably even spent that much time in like Sunday school or something. Where is he getting this? Like, at what point in what soteriology is it necessary for somebody to be so desperate due to the fear caused by the realization that they are heading for hell? And I would limit it to the New Testament. Because one of the things that these guys will like to do is like, oh no, if you want the weeping and gnashing of teeth stuff, you can get a little bit of that in the New Testament. In fact, you get that phrase, weeping and gnashing of teeth, in the New Testament. But if you really want to get into the condemnation, wrathy stuff from God, they'll refer back to books in the Old Testament. But where is that would be the best question to ask him. Where are you getting that notion that an essential element to repentance is a realization that you are destined for hell without God's salvation, without Christ's forgiveness and salvation?
Like,
The
see,
Bible
because-
teaches,
Darth-
Jesus himself said, a man must be born again in order to enter the kingdom of heaven.
A man must be born again. So this is what I've heard Darth do this, and he's leaning on this. I'm going to let him finish this, and then I'm going to point out a nice bit of trivia.
When we read through the New Testament,
You have
what
to
we
think
find
about-
out that being born again is we come to a point in our lives where we realize our utter guilt, condemnation, and
But
wrath
don't
that we're
you think
under
in
Wait,
order
wrath.
to get a Christian follower?
This is interesting because so he is attempting to lay out, like he's told them, well, what we're told by Christ in the Gospels is that we must be born again. And then he attempts to set up, this is how that born again process is going to happen. The first stage is essentially what he's describing, the equivalent of hitting rock bottom if you're a junkie or an addict, right? Like that's essentially step number one. And from the sounds of it, the way that Darth's mind tends to work, you can't deviate from this course. So this is slightly new.
Or don't you want to, instead of condemn her, help teach her?
That's-
I don't
that's
think what
my
she was. I don't
argument.
think
Okay,
what she
so
was
Jay,
saying.
I'm not condemning her. I'm simply
Yes,
That's
pointing out
exactly
to
what you're
her.
doing. You really just
Listen, there's too
gaslight
much
her.
crosstalk.
No, there's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, please,
We're not
guys,
doing-
hello.
Okay, now we're going to start getting into kind of the triggering crosstalk thing. So I'm going to get back to the original thing that he raised, right? So the first thing he wants to do, and this is where, Daddy Darth thinks that he's big papa Christianity and he's going to tell these people how it works. He started off with the born again thing. Okay. As a former Christian and having grown up in Wesleyan and holiness and charismatic, different groups, etc., born again gets thrown around pretty easily. And as a Christian growing up, I always had kind of my issues with the phrase born again because I thought it was used kind of flippantly. And as a teenager who was really into church and was starting to try to get into studying the Bible, I didn't really understand what it meant or what the theological connotations of it were. As I got older, I started hearing things about it that seemed to contradict what we had been taught as Christians. And this is something that a lot of Christians don't know. So I'll try to lay this out as quickly as possible, and hopefully it won't be pedantic or too boring. I can source this too if anybody's interested. And most of what I'm getting this from is from, there's a couple of excerpts from two Bart Ehrman books where he talks about this, like misquoting Jesus, and I'm blanking on the other one, but I can find it for you. It's also available on his blog. So the particular exchange where you find this part where Jesus specifically states that man must be born again, quote unquote, comes from an exchange in John chapter 3, I believe. I think it starts in verse 5 or 6. And it's a conversation that Jesus has with Nicodemus, who's an educated Jew, right? And Nicodemus essentially comes to Jesus and asks him, what must I do to, enter the kingdom of heaven, or something like this, right? And so that's where Jesus kind of lays out that passage. I tell you that, a man must be born again. And when he says this, Nicodemus becomes kind of incredulous about this. And he says, are you saying a man has to essentially climb back into his mother's womb and repeat start life over again. And Jesus corrects him and says, no, that's not exactly what I mean. And he talks about it being a spiritual thing, being a birth from the Father, from the spiritual realm or something like that. I'm paraphrasing poorly here, but read John chapter 3, read the exchange between Nicodemus. But this is a key thing for a lot of Christians, especially the born-again Christians. Jesus tells them you must be born again. Scholars of Greek, Koine Greek, will tell you that the word again in that's translated there in the Bible is a Greek word that is called anothen, A-N-O-T-H-E-N is how you'd spell it phonetically in English, anothen. And that Greek word has two meanings. One means again, so born anothen, born again. The other one means born from above, born anothen, from above. And so this little story here in the Gospel of John has a pivot point based on the ambiguity of a Greek word. Anothen, meaning either born again or born from above. And that's kind of pivotal to the misunderstanding. Nicodemus is like, born again? You mean I have to get it back inside my mother and repeat my life over? And Jesus is like, no, man, it's from above. I'm talking about that transcendent stuff. I always feel like Jesus in the Gospel of John is at his most hippiest. Anyway, so that's what this is based on. Historically, if you're gonna credit the Gospel of John with being historically accurate, this tale is a tall one, because in Aramaic there is no equivalent word to anothen. So if Jesus and Nicodemus had this exchange in any real way, they would have been speaking to each other in the dominant language of the region and of the time. It was Aramaic. Jesus would have been speaking that. Then Nicodemus probably knew how to speak Greek, probably knew how to write it a little bit too. He was supposed to be a very educated person, but he would have been speaking in the common tongue in that area. That's Aramaic. Aramaic does not have this word. So that story was probably invented by the author of John, or it was a story invented by somebody else, had been passed on through oral tradition, and the author of John put it in there. So the born again thing that Christians really like is based on a turn of Greek phrase that actually makes the story less historically accurate. So if any Christians have an issue with that, please come at me. You know where to find me. But it's one of those things that I've when I first heard about that, I always thought that was kind of interesting. And when I hear somebody like Darth kind of jump into the whole thing, like, well, it's about the importance of being born again. I'm like, yeah, that born again claim, that's not as strong as you'd like to believe.
Guys, hey, Sajade, you're violating the rules. Okay, we're not going to do this crosstalk here. Okay, now, Sajade, does the Bible lay out clearly what a Christian is?
No.
Can I first speak first?
Okay, mute. Go ahead, please.
I don't think a conversation works like that, where you can just ask a question.
Sajade, listen to me carefully. You're quibbling. You're not okay. Listen, I'm going to remove you from the stage if you dodge the question.
If that's what you
does the Bible? Listen to me. I'll tell you this last time.
Please,
there is no arguing with the. Okay, have a nice day.
Not...
You both of you are done. Okay. Okay.
Keeping it Christian, keeping it charitable.
These people want to make outrageous statements, and then when they're called on a carpet to explain it, and then we explain why they're incorrect, they just become defensive and argumentative and just engage in cross-talking. No, you two guys can stay down there and cool your jets, okay? See, you want to go on and on and on, but you don't want to be challenged, okay? These people want to talk about the Bible. They want to talk about Christianity, but they're putting on full display that they're ignorant of the Bible. Why do you think I asked?
So Darth Dawkins, who's gone back to using whoever that was, it Taylor Hicks. He's using Taylor Hicks's photo again as his avatar. Truly, he has regressed. He used to use this back in fact, I think he's using it in the Alex Malpass video. I'll be moving on to. He jumps in here and starts steamrolling this conversation. I'm sure he's going to tell them that that's not what he's doing. He's trying to set the record straight, or he's going to educate these Christians. But he tried to bulldoze them. And as they're trying to object to the fact that he's just kind of helped himself to things and he's not letting them get any kind of objections, and he then kicks them both. So his time on Clubhouse is turning out like this is all very much par for the course for Darth. So I'm kind of wondering if Clubhouse is any different than Discord. I've heard some things where people have said, and I don't know if this is propaganda coming from the app, like, oh, it's a much like a kinder, gentler social media environment. Like, well, not for long, folks.
Why do you think I asked the question? What is the fifth book in the New Testament? That is an easy question to answer. Anybody who has any basic familiarity with
Is
the
it
Bible.
X?
Yeah.
It's also an irrelevant question to answer, because if she had started to say that and he asked her 3 or 4 times, someone could just as quickly, while talking with him, quickly do a Google search and find that it's Acts. And then, so depending on his attitude, he can then just turn around and say, you know what, I don't believe that you knew that. I think that you Googled it. I don't know if he's ever actually accused somebody of doing that with that particular question, but there's no reason to think that he couldn't if that's where his mood went. So why ask the question to begin with? If you think the person is ignorant of certain biblical doctrines or things like that, then just ask them straightforward questions. After he realizes that she doesn't know that Acts is the 5th chapter of the Bible, he then asks her about Hezekiah 2, which isn't a book that exists in any case. But he asks her, does it exist in the Old Testament, New Testament, or Apocrypha? It doesn't exist in any of those. It doesn't exist at all. Like, okay, so you already know she doesn't know some basic orders of books in the New Testament. Why did you go on to a trick question? And the only reason he did that was because he wants to wipe his filthy shoes on somebody.
Yes, it's X. Okay. And now the fact that somebody gets the answer correct doesn't mean they're right about what they're saying about the Bible, but it's a question that's designed to smoke out those people who are trying to suggest that they have a basic familiarity of the Bible, and yet they don't even know the 5th book in the New Testament.
That doesn't prove anything.
Okay. Talk is cheap. People are so accustomed to shooting off their mouths, but they deeply resent their assertions being challenged. And then they have a hissy fit. She claims she's a Christian. She's not a Christian.
A few moments later.
Just as just as a psychology major, I just certain body language and certain tones of how I don't have a problem with the message, but it's definitely the way how he was going across about it as well was just definitely alarming, and especially her as a woman, like it's a certain way how he could have just said how he felt without having to be so hostile towards.
Now, I don't know if this guy's kind of being like unnecessarily, like in a way, is trying to be kind of a little bit chauvinist or something like that, but. Like, it is interesting if his point is like, well, yeah, he seems to be especially interested in going after her aggressively as opposed to going after one of the guys. Like, but the thing is that she made the claim about Leviticus. And so, someone was wrong about the Bible on the internet. It's Darth Dawkins' duty, granted to him by God. He has to go in there and bite them. He needs to go on the attack because he's Jesus's favorite pit bull or something. On social media, of all the wretched places.
So that's all.
I really appreciate that, and I thank you guys for allowing me back on the stage. I didn't like how he called me these people.
Yeah, well, the other interesting thing here is too, I see, like Jay Robbins in there. I think that Theo person with the fox. I think I've seen that person before. And then Tone Loke, obviously, good old Antonio, they're in there. So he's brought a few people from the old servers over into Clubhouse with them. But I kind of get the impression that these two people that were just talking, especially Gomia, I think that's what it is, Gomia and Naomi, and the other guy, I don't think this is their first time, maybe their first time being exposed to Darth. And from the sounds of it, they're Christian. And she's upset enough to be crying. So hats off, Darth. We'll be looking forward to welcoming a few more people into the atheist fold as your work on Clubhouse progresses.
And I feel like this is just so indicative of like my experiences with this religion. It's just always like, it's always put you down, and it's always ostracized you and make fun of you and put you on a stage and make others like just like there's no love. There's no love. And I was just explaining to you guys before he was able to hear how like my relationship with God is one of love. And like
Darth is going to want to cancel that shit real quick. So this I mean, it sounds sad too, because it sounds like this not only is he has he upset her, but this is familiar to her. She's run into Christians like Darth before in life, and some of us have. I've never run into one as toxic as Darth, but I've run into some that have come close, and in person in churches I attended. So that's really stressful.
Maybe I was incorrect about what I said, and I was actually not asserting from a place of understanding. Like, I wish he would have heard that I said, I've heard a scholar say. And I've heard a historian say, like, I'm not saying that, oh, this is it. And I'm just citing what is out there. And I just want people to comment on it so that I can learn it and how I can understand. I can be a better person, how I can be a better Christian. And like, I feel so like debased as a woman of color, as a woman, as a person, as a human being, by this man who may know so much about God, but doesn't embody it every single day with every single person, how he just spoke to me and how he spoke to Sajid.
Yep.
I wanted to comment because, you know, it was the wording of a question that I think was, I at least, at the very end of the day, like, I at least want to make my point heard, that when he asked, when are you going to hell? And when did you know that you're going to hell? I answered in a way because I don't think I'm going to hell now, but maybe there was a time when I was so down on my luck and I'm at rock bottom all the time, honestly, but like there was a time when it was worse, and how I accepted this love and like God into my heart and what God meant to me into my heart. And there's been a turnaround. I've always been blessed throughout my life, but it's just this awareness that I have of things right now, and this gentleness that I have with people, and this trust that I have in the idea that it's always going to be okay. That started a little later. And so like, that's why I'm pretty happy with myself now. And like, I was just saying that like, this is just, and I said this before, but this is very indicative of my experiences with this religion in particular, how it's driven out of fear, and like how I am afraid to speak when Darth comes on the stage, how I'm afraid to ask a question, how I'm afraid to love God in the way that I want to love God because Darth is telling me that I'm going to go to hell for it. I don't like that. And that's all I have to say. And maybe I'm not a Christian like to you guys. Maybe I'm not a Christian, but I love God with all of my heart.
I was actually, I may have looked like I was sitting in this room at the time, but I was in the middle of something, so I didn't hear the conversation.
real class act, Antonio. So, that was very heartfelt. You seem very upset about something that this guy that I idolize and always chat with did to you. But I wasn't around for the whole thing. Could you go back and revisit and maybe give me a quick synopsis of what caused you so much grief, anguish, and pain? What the fuck? Oh my God, these guys. And yeah, somebody posted Tone Logan, J. Robin crickets. So J. Robin leaves real estate. Yeah, J. Robin apparently gets like, okay, so you actually, I've seen this kind of stuff happen before. I've gotten after some of these YouTube wannabe apologists for doing this kind of stuff. They're in it to aggravate atheists, right? They want to piss them off. They want to get them wound up. But when it comes time for somebody like this to have this happen, and they have an opportunity to minister to someone who is in a point of searching and genuine questioning and seems receptive to the message, they can't be bothered. Darth was only interested in stomping on this person rhetorically. She said something wrong. He has to crush that. Doesn't give a shit about her. Doesn't care how she feels about stuff. You don't have to feel about Jesus. You don't have to feel about Christianity. Christianity is right, and you need to be right. Anything else is wrong, and you're stupid if you get things wrong. And if you get things wrong, you should be punished because being wrong is bad. This is just, room temperature level IQ kind of thinking and bullying that Darth has. And for whatever reason, a lot of the people that gravitate towards him in a positive sense seem to think that he has a talent for this. He's no more talented than your average bully. He's got some experience because he's a loudmouth old fart. But this is a tremendous failure amongst Christians. And if these guys think like, how can I judge based on the fact that I'm an atheist? I'm talking about condemnations that I've heard from Christians to other Christians in groups that I've been in, groups that I grew up in, watching them condemn each other for failing to do this precise thing, to be there, to show compassion, to show empathy, to show support, to be ready to provide guidance, to be ready to provide a helping hand. And that's not here. So for whatever community that these guys are trying to, whatever Christian community or sense of loyalty or unity that they want to try to bring about, if they think that they're in the by defending the faith, they're going to ingratiate the faith towards more people. That doesn't seem to be the case.
What exactly happened?
I asked a question about whether because Constance she asked a question about it seems like we're giving some human traits to God, and then Darth responded, people tend to anthropomorphize God, but that's not the case and we shouldn't do that. And then I said, well, one of the key components of anthropomorphization is assigning gender pronouns to these entities. So when we say he or she or they, we inherently anthropomorphize God in our own language and in our own Western concept of making sense of what God is. Darth didn't like that because Darth then said, and I guess you guys don't like that because hey, it's fair. But the challenge was, are you saying that since God refers to him as himself as a he, are you saying that God is wrong and the Bible is wrong? And I retorted that I just think that when we think about the language and the transcription, we just need to be aware that there are we are speaking in a completely different language with a completely different set of just rules, predicate rules. And so sometimes it might not be the case, but I was wrong, and I shouldn't have said that.
Okay.
So, yeah, and so that's when I was kicked off the stage the first time. But the second time I came up, and then I made this I spoke about the Bible, and I made the unfounded claim. Well, I didn't make the claim. I just kind of cited that there are historians, or no, I did make the claim that the Bible is both God's word, but it was founded in a time. We need to study the history and the politics of the Bible as well, and just not think we have to always be aware that there was a politic of a time in a certain area of the world that did inform some of the law.
Yeah, Daniel Cooper. We know that D.D. would display compassion, empathy, and all that if they bowed down and declared subservient to his knowledge. Yeah, it's like looking for forgiveness from Ray Fiennes' character from Schindler's List. Even if you do get, the I pardon you, 15 minutes later he eats he chips his tooth on something and he's putting a bullet in your head from his balcony.
Not God's law, but some of the settings and some of the things that are in the Bible. And so then I cited a verse, and I wasn't entirely sure the book it was in, but what it talked about, gay marriage and being gay and laying with another man. And I made the claim that there are historians that might think that that's a mistranslation of pedophilia.
Right, JC.
There wasn't really another word, but then that might have been incorrect. But Darth cut me off and kicked me off the stage and said, these people, and I'm just okay. I just wanted an open conversation. And if you guys can tell me I'm wrong in a respectful way, then I totally appreciate that. But I'm not about to be called these people by a white man. So
I hope she doesn't have any more interactions with him, because she'll be hearing that quite a bit. All right. So that's it for that one. Yeah, just to wrap that one up. She sums it up for Tone. I kind of wondered what Tone's reaction was after she summed it up. I'm like, oh well, okay, well, sometimes Darth style doesn't work with everybody. Some people get a little bit. You know what? He cares. He wants you to horseshit. He does not. He cares about being right. He does not care about other people. Least of all other Christians, from what I can tell. Because it seems like if they're a little bit wrong about something, or they're not well versed in the Bible, they're not real Christians. So I don't have to care about them. All right, it's the flashback time. So here we go. We're going to get into this one. So this one goes back a ways, and this is back when I think Darth Dawkins, he's playing around with it. I think it was Dawkins' deity, also Darth Dawkins, aka Evolution Faults. So he's in here, and this is one of these times where he and Antonio Fletcher in here, and Hogtie, who's been around for quite a long time. Hogtie is pretty funny. Hogtie basically introduces the two of them and essentially wants to see if how Alex is going to deal with some of Darth's scripts. So here we go.
The salvation of souls. Alex is here. Maybe he wants to discuss the same conversation I've had with you 3 times already. Do you want to do that instead? It's Antonio's hangout. Okay,
that's fine.
Yeah, I'll mute my mic while I yawn.
Welcome.
Can I do the introduction though? Can I do the introduction? Antonio, have you met Alex? Alex Malpass, Antonio Fletcher.
I don't think he's Matt, no.
Yeah, because I think Ant, he stepped away from the keyboard a little bit. I'm not too sure if he's there. If you are Ant, unmute yourself, but he may be away from the keyboard. So I'll definitely reintroduce him. So
Yeah, if you could get a little closer to your mic, Alex, so we can hear you better.
Sorry, yeah, I'm cooking at the same time, so forgive me if the volume's a bit too.
All right.
Well, I mean,
go ahead.
Well, I've been listening to this series of conversations between you and Hogtie for a couple of days. I'm quite familiar with the presuppositional routine or argument or whatever perspective. I think you made a couple of mistakes the other day. I think maybe you didn't mean to say it, but you ended up saying that inductive inferences beg the question. And I don't think that can be sustained. I think that's wrong. So I mean, I don't want to hijack the conversation.
No, what I was saying is when they're making an argument using inductive reasoning, the conclusion cannot be logically necessitated. That's what I said.
Deductively, an inductive argument isn't deductively valid. That's true.
That's a really good point.
But that doesn't undermine induction.
No, what I'm saying is it doesn't make for a firm foundation for somebody to argue for the uniformity of nature based upon the consistency of their sense experience.
So just specifically, what are you saying, that if there was an argument where the conclusion of it was?
Well, when they're claiming that they can be rational, there have to be certain preconditions in order for them to be rational, right, Alex?
You can maybe.
I want to warn people because somebody I showed this to a while ago, because this has been floating around. Alex Malpass has had this on here since 2017. This might have happened around that time, or maybe it might be even a little bit older. But if you were to make a drinking game out of the number of times that Darth says Alex's name, usually after asking a question, you could even limit it to that. He asks him a question and then says his name, Alex. Even if you were to limit it to questions followed by the use of the name Alex with a tone, that drinking game would be lethal for all parties involved.
I mean, I guess that's one way of looking at it. But look, if I make an inductive inference, do you think that that's irrational by definition?
I don't believe, unless you start from that it is the case that the Christian God exists, that you have any basis for rationality.
Could you prove that that's true?
That's a good one. Can you prove that that's true?
I don't think that anything can be proven unless it is the case that the Christian God exists and he has constructed the world in such a way that we can know some things that we can't be wrong about. Are you under the view?
But how would you know whether or not you were right or wrong about it if you can't use deduction unless you presume that deduction comes from God, and you can't use induction, right? Because Darth seems to think that induction is a flimsier, flakier version of logic. So how did you get to the point where this can be done? The weird thing about this is back in this point in time, Darth doesn't do the thing that he did with Smokey, that idea where revelation is subjective experience. He could basically do that. I don't know if it would it might solve certain problems for him and raise more questions. But if you wanted to dig in and try to just simplify this and say, you know what, induction or appealing to our sense perception is in a way that is revelation from God. I'm just going to presuppose, that thing that we have to presuppose about ourselves, our subjective agency, our sense experience, our notions of reason. We kind of presuppose them because if we call them into question, we usually end up denying them in a way that reaffirms them anyway. So they're inescapable. That is revelation. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he keeps dancing around with Alex about his usual thing.
You, Alex, that something can be proven in your worldview where there is no God?
I think things can be proven. I'd like you to prove the claim that nothing can be proven unless the Christian God existed. So you just said that. I'd like you to prove that.
Alex, can something be proven in a world where there is no God?
Well, if you're claiming that it can't be, I'd like you to show me.
No, I asked you a question.
Well, let's say I'm open-minded about it.
Well, can something be proven in your worldview?
I believe so, but if you can correct me, go ahead.
What would that be, Alex?
Well, I mean, so when you do a logical proof, right, it means proceeding via rules of inference, right? So if you make a premise or a couple of premises, then you can prove that the conclusion follows if all you've done is apply various agreed upon rules of inference. That's what a proof means.
Alex, could you tell me something that you can prove that you can't be wrong about?
Okay, so let's say if P then Q is the first premise, P is the second premise. I prove that Q.
Alex, I'm not talking about in a theoretical realm. I'm talking about in the actual world. Is there something that can be actually proven? Could you give me an example?
Why was that not in the actual world? What I just said then.
No, you're giving me a modal representation.
Yeah, Enrique, I think it's interesting over the last several years, but I think that in a way, the point you're making here is true. When he was in Google Hangouts, I think he had to kind of moderate his tone, but once he got more power on things like P&R on Discord servers, he was able to kind of develop this kind of just. I mean, it's a shortcut, but also a short circuit where he would just go from 1 to 11 super quickly, because now he's figured out the shorthand of all these theists. Even when he was like completely wrong about somebody, he would just, no, I know you're a troll, you're kicked, you're banned, forever banished.
Explain to me something that can actually be proven, meaning that you can't be wrong about.
Look, the point that I just made then, if P then Q, P therefore Q, you can put anything you like in for P and Q, and that will be a proof. Okay,
show me something that can be proven where the conclusion where you can't be wrong about.
Okay, so if it's daytime, then the moon is made of green cheese. It's daytime. I just proved that the moon is made of green cheese, right? It follows from those two premises. Right? That's how you prove something.
Would that be dependent that the physical world around us operates in a regular way, Alex?
No.
Really? So if all events are the product of chance and not some underlying uniformity or law-like conditions, you can have rationality and prove things?
Well, it's a strange premise. I mean, is everything chance? I don't know.
Alex, can something be proven by a rational means if all events, including brain states, are simply the product of chance and not an underlying uniformity of nature?
Let's say that every single event that happens in the universe follows one after another chaotically, with no order following them. Well, let's say that that's right. So that's our hypothesis, right? Would that mean that if P then Q, P therefore Q is invalid? I don't see that it does.
Alex,
if
all of your brain states.
Yeah, watch this. Darth does not follow this. He just introduces, well, brain fizz.
Are the product of pure chance and randomness and not an underlying regularity, then how would there be any rationality?
You seem to be asking a different question now, right? So if how would I know? That's what you're asking, right?
No, you're presupposing. Are you presupposing that your ability to reason about existence is predicated that nature operates in some regular way? If nature was not operating in a regular way, would you be able to reason?
This is always just the most obnoxious element out of this. You hear this from guys like Mr. Batman and Nephilim Free that want to, especially Mr. Batman, who claims that he is a science teacher, and the thing he knows, what he understands as a science teacher, is that you have to presuppose a law-like function of the universe, of nature around you. If it doesn't, if there's not something imposing some sense of order on it, then science just becomes impossible. It's like that's not actually how that works. What we tend to be able to derive patterns out of what we see in nature, but it would be a mistake to assume that all of nature, as some kind of whole, operates by some kind of imposition of will. This is sort of the basis of what a lot of theologians and a lot of Christians tend to think. And it's what they bring into these kinds of discussions. When you try to also hitch that to logic and say logic is somehow chained to that, if logic's going to explain this stuff and this stuff is operating in a law-like manner, logic can only explain this stuff accurately if that stuff is behaving in a law-like manner, and the only thing that provides for that law-like manner is God. And Alex is trying to demonstrate, no, you could still do modus ponens if the things that you're attempting to describe aren't necessarily guided in some kind of law-like way, or were planned out in advance or something. And Darth seems to be just ignoring that completely.
So that inference that I just gave to you a moment ago doesn't seem...
Alex, I asked you the question. is your ability to reason about things predicated on the idea that nature operates in a law-like way?
Okay, so it seems to me the answer is no, and the reason for that is that that inference I gave you a minute ago seems to be valid independently of whether any events are happening in an ordered way.
So you don't need the uniformity of nature in order to be a rational human being?
I don't need the uniformity of nature in order to. Well, let's put it like this: the validity of modus ponens that I just said to you doesn't depend on the uniformity of nature. No.
You're not addressing my question, Alex.
Maybe the question is not clear to me then.
Alex, if the chemistry in your brain was simply absolutely erratic and did not operate in some law-like way, would you be able to have rational thought?
I don't know. Possibly not.
Okay,
but here's the thing: if let's put that to the test. Consider what he said there. If you've got brain states and your brain states are based on these chemical reactions, and those chemical reactions could be something other than what they are, well, that would upset the capacity for you to have rational thought. Because if your brain states and the biology that provides for them isn't just so, rationality flies out the window. Explain being drunk or high, but still being capable of being rational. This just seems to be, and maybe I'm being way too commonsensical about this, maybe a little too lowbrow, but it doesn't seem to me that you can fundamentally change the brain states of people. And people can have really much more significant changes in their brain states with things like tumors, the presence of masses. It doesn't make them irrational. So this seems like a complete nothing burger from Darth Dawkins. And I've always kind of wondered why I don't know that he's actually gone into this too much on the last few years. Maybe he's realized that there really wasn't anything there. Saitin Bruggencate used to really lean into this one, and it was just such fluff that it's just so easy to dismiss because you have natural observations of it all the time. You can find a career alcoholic who is completely pickled, who still has the capacity to do something that is quote unquote logical. They can still be rational.
Okay, good. So you see, your claim to reasoning is contingent on the precondition of the regularity of nature. Does nature operate in a law-like way, Alex?
It seems to, but I don't think that my reasoning...
Well, let me ask you this question. It seems to. Well, how would you be able to visually differentiate whether the consistencies that you see are the product of a law-like environment versus chance?
I'm not even sure I understand what that question means.
Well, you said it seems to. You're appealing to your sense perception of certain consistencies, that those observations of those consistencies are indicative of nature that operates in some regular law-like way. Could chance produce the same type of consistencies, Alex?
Maybe it would help if we made it a bit more specific. So look, if I said, if I observe a regularity, I could be wrong about whether it's... So if I say every swan I've ever seen is white, therefore every swan is white, I could always be wrong about that. Right? So
Alex, you're not answering my question.
He actually is, but old Darthy here is not. He's not picking up what Alex is putting down.
Alex, could chance produce the same number of consistencies that nature operating in law-like way?
Listen, I don't know, but I'm not.
Yes, because that's at the heart of the problem of induction that Darth and many others like him fetishize. Right? You in your world of revelation, God has put you in a place where the only swans ever revealed to you are white ones, and so you can probabilistically, inductively, reach the conclusion that swans are white, and then you are transported to a land in which you see a black swan. Therefore, chance seems to be what imposed the fact that, because was it not chance, or was it just God's good grace? That this idea that the fact that he misses this is, well, it's not really astounding to me, but he's built a foundation off of crap arguments like this, and he's still kind of running with this thing.
I'm an advocate that everything is pure chance, so I feel like you're making.
I didn't ask you if you were an advocate of it, Alex. I said.
It's not my view. I mean, is it your view?
Said, man.
But look, is it your view? Do you
Tone's starting to get aggressive when he gets like that? Then he starts getting kicky.
think it could happen?
It doesn't matter. You see, my asking you a question is not predicated on what I believe. I'm asking you, Alex. You're coming to the table as a skeptic
portending that you can reason and that you can prove things.
Portending.
And I asked you, is that all?
I think he said portending there. That was weird. Again, he seems to be missing this. What about the fact that a person could be, let's say that revelation is true, and an individual who is born in a particular place and time, let's say they're born in England, they were born in the United North America, they're only exposed to white swans. So that means that revelation is, for them, all that has ever been revealed to them is white swans, and everyone that they know, as far as they've ever been familiar with, is white swans. And then they're offered an opportunity to travel to a distant land, let's say Japan, and when they go to Japan, and there are black swans. Now it has been revealed to them that all the white swans that they thought they'd reached the conclusion based on revelation that all swans are white, they have been shown that they were wrong. How is that any different than chance? If chance is just repeatedly showing you nothing but white swans, and then you finally at some point see a black one, or then that's shown that can be a problem, right? Obviously, you can have a gap in your knowledge. Also, the other case can be true, that a person never sees a black swan, so they have to take it upon someone else's reporting that, no, it's not the case that all swans are white. Well, as far as I'm concerned, all swans are white because I've never seen a swan that wasn't white. And you could live your entire life in your environment and never even see a picture of a black swan. So what value does that have in terms of that person evaluating revelation? Shouldn't God be revealing truth to you? But if God is revealing a situation in which a person is reaching a conclusion that all swans are white, it sounds like that God's part of God's revelation is for that person to be confused or incorrect or deceived.
All predicated that nature operates in a law-like way, and you basically answered yes.
No, I answered no. I said no quite explicitly.
Oh, so if nature, if everything is the product of chance and not a law-like environment, you could be rational.
It's already a false dichotomy. It's not just a China.
No, it's not a false dichotomy. I asked you a question, Alex, and you're being evasive.
I have a question for Alex once he's
okay. So, Alex, if every event, including your brain states, were not the product of regularity, but were simply the product of chance, could you be rational?
I don't know.
Okay, so why should I accept anything you say about the nature of reality as being rational when you're standing on a foundation where you're just assuming that things work a certain way?
Because you are assuming that things work a certain way, and you can't prove the foundation itself. You've just provided a narrative about a foundation you prefer, but you can't prove it any better than someone who says, I don't know if there's a foundation or not. The central weakness to this seems to be that, as far as Darth is concerned, no one in their right mind would ever take an agnostic approach to whether or not there was a foundation to the sum of all reality, and that's it. But as far as when people are trying to say, like, I don't think that you're not standing on as firm a foundation as you'd like to think, and asserting the kind of foundation that he is forcing into the discussion actually has a lot of issues with it. And some of them are being addressed here by Alex Malpass. For instance, this idea that remember how this started when this began. Darth seemed to be getting into this mode where he didn't like, and Malpass had kind of picked up on it, where Darth doesn't seem to have much. He doesn't seem to take much stock in the idea of inductive logic, right? Inductive logic can't be logically proven. I think something he said, something like that. And Malpass had to point out, yeah, inductive logic cannot be deductively proven because it's a different kind of logic. But that doesn't mean that inductive logic is somehow irrational, it just has its weaknesses. Deductive logic has as well. When Darth then asks him to prove something, he gives him modus ponens, which is actually deductive. And now, because it doesn't, this piece of deductive logic doesn't represent something in actuality. I think this is where Darth is going with this. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there. It seems like, well, you can't connect it to something like that. You can't prove anything, therefore it doesn't work. What I would be interested in knowing, and I'm kind of just thinking out loud here, is can logic prove God? And if Darth thinks that, would that make God subject to logic?
No, so you're conditionalizing on the premise that everything is pure chance, right? But I'm not saying that that's the case. So I don't see what you're saying undermines me in any way. Right? It's just,
well, your claim,
if nothing existed at all, could you speak? Well, no, probably not. Right? But you're not advocating that nothing exists at all. So, so what? I mean, it would be irrelevant to make that
Okay,
argument.
so your claim to be able to prove things, is it not dependent that nature operates in a regular way?
He's already answered this. He said no. The proof that he offered was modus ponens, and that's it. It works regardless of what you connect to it. You can plug in anything in there.
So the claim that there are a priori deductive proofs, it seems to be independent of whether nature works in an orderly way or not. I don't see how that's. You're not engaging with that.
Could you be in the possession and exercise a rational mind if all events, including your brain states, are not the product of some type of regularity of nature, Alex?
So if that was the case,
I would answer this question a little bit differently than Alex does, but just to throw this out there, I don't. You have to. He's assuming a regularity of nature that he's not able to provide. Now, the only reason that this is the part that really bothers me. The idea that there's a regularity to nature rests on a lot of work done in the empirical sciences, but the empirical sciences do not make the claim that all of nature is uniform. Now, certain physical sciences will make claims about things that are possible or impossible based on contradictions within those particular fields, and some of those are well borne out. But this idea of a regularity of nature is essentially coming from empirical observations about the natural world around us. These guys are running with us and saying, well, because we know A, B, and C are regular, we can conclude that the rest of the alphabet is regular, and therefore everything works in a particular pre-programmed order. There must be a programmer. Prove me wrong. Well, you already started off by committing several different fallacies there. The biggest being that you just kind of generalized all of nature into being orderly because some scientists have made some observations about things that do appear to have a pattern, an orderliness that we can detect and maybe predict. So yeah.
If it were the case, say, that there was no underlying laws that govern the universe, and everything just happened by chance, right? Then maybe by chance I figure out what the the laws of the universe are. I mean, who knows, right? If everything's complete chance, that could happen. Or are you saying there's a law that forbids that in a world that's pure chance?
No, I'm saying could you be rational in a world where nature didn't operate in a law?
Yeah, maybe
like
I'm
that?
rational by chance in that world. Could
I'm
that not
sorry,
happen?
Can you get closer to your microphone, because it's very difficult to understand you? So there's a lot. It's very
If
echoey.
the world was pure chance, maybe I stumble upon rationality by chance. Could that not happen?
And sure, but
Okay,
why?
so you can
why
be
should
rational in a
I?
world that's pure
Why?
chance.
Good. Then why should I give any credence to what you're saying or you're thinking? Because how would I be able to differentiate whether you actually stumble on something that's correct or not?
It seems to be your hypothesis that everything is pure chance. I'm not saying that.
No, I didn't make it a hypothesis that it was. I said it could be, right?
That's a hypothesis, doofus. You're speaking hypothetically.
Well, I mean,
or would you like to rule that out?
Oh, that was a
Could
neat
be in
trick.
what sense?
Oh, would you like to rule that out? Okay, so this is what he wants to do. He wants to get Alex to either commit to, it's either all chaos or none of it is. There can't be anything left to chance. It all has to be in God's control. This is just a weird, belabored way of getting someone to acknowledge that it's impossible for a God not to be there, right? Because somebody's got to be pulling all the strings.
It's logically possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
Is your rational discourse completely dependent that nature operates in a law-like way?
Is rational discourse completely dependent on nature operating in a law-like way?
He's already answered this question.
Yeah. Is your ability as a human being to think rationally, is it contingent that nature operates in a regular law-like way?
But see, again, this is one of those things where it seems to be like, if Darth really wants to hammer into this idea, right? Like the fact, and this is where they're talking past each other, and Darth, for whatever reason, pride or just he just enjoys belaboring these things. He could just simply try to bring up the fact that he believes that the subjective experience of all people is revelation, or is somehow being granted by God. You have to presuppose that your ability to even perceive things or reason about your sense experiences is something that has to come from God. But for whatever reason, he avoids getting into that central discussion. He gets he gets very squirrely about what he's talking about when he gets into Revelation. Sometimes Revelation seems to be something that God told people. Sometimes it seems to be like direct information that according to Darth, has to be true. And other times it seems to be something a little bit more metaphysical. It's this idea that the very possibility of sense perception from the jump is revelation from God. But he doesn't ever really commit to it. It's almost as if he's operating with a bunch of double standards.
I'm not sure that it is. I think if everything was random, I might still be able to operate rationally by chance.
And you might be able to, but how would you know?
Okay, so I mean, how would I know if everything was totally random?
But that's different. Like at first it was, how is it possible for you to do that? And Alex is like, yeah, it could be possible for you to do that. And now all of a sudden he switches to, yeah, but how would you know? How would you know that how do you know that you're getting everything right now?
And I'd stumbled across rationality by chance.
Yeah, if everything's by chance, are we being rational?
So in this hypothesis, everything is totally random, but I've stumbled across rationality by chance. So presumably I am rational in this hypothesis.
Well, if it's all random, how are you going to know?
Well, but I'm also rational in this hypothesis, so I could figure it out.
Yeah, but how would you know that if everything's by chance?
Well, I'll come up with a rational proof.
But you see, but you coming up that would be chance too. Everything would be chance.
No, because once I've stumbled across rationality by chance, I now have rationality. So I can.
No, you have. You see, your thoughts are completely random.
This is torturous.
You see, you're presupposing.
They're not random once I've discovered rationality.
No, because every thought, every event occurs by chance.
So you're saying in a world where I don't really have any thought process.
Right. Yeah. Well, in a world where everything is chance, can rationality actually be ongoing?
Okay, so the question just seems to be, in a world where you don't really have any thought processes, could you have thought processes? So obviously
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if all events are caused by chance, can you conduct rational thought?
Well, does he believe that thoughts are transmitted to you? Or does he believe that, like, either way, it seems to be operating on a couple of weird ideas, like either thoughts are something that are being beamed into you through quote unquote revelation, or you have the capacity to generate your own thoughts. Like it seems kind of odd to me that maybe Darth doesn't know much about how the brain works, but I wonder if he thinks that thoughts are the same as, like, extending your arm, or bending your arm at the elbow or something. Like thoughts come unbidden to people all the time. So I'm wondering how he would explain something just as sort of like kind of common sense, as that.
If that was true, right? Let's just say that that's right.
You're not answering my question, Alex. You're being evasive.
No, he's not.
Listen, just let me finish.
This is funny. Like, Alex is being evasive. No, Darth is not being clear with what he's talking about, and is erratically shifting every time Alex lands on something that could be a good point, rather than follow through and maybe get some clarification and maybe adjust his argument to be something better. Darth just shifts his foot and goes to another point that's also kind of flaky.
Sentence, and then you can decide whether I'm being evasive. Okay. If rationality presupposes regularities, then given my rationality, that indicates that there are regularities.
No, right? It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Okay, so rationality doesn't presuppose regularities.
No, because all of your thoughts could be simply random, and it doesn't mean that you're being rational.
If my thoughts were completely random, then we couldn't have this conversation.
Why not?
Well, how could you exchange ideas with me discursively like this if all my thoughts were random?
It's all occurring by chance, Alex.
Well, don't you think that we're exchanging ideas?
It doesn't matter what my worldview is. What matters is your worldview, Alex.
Okay, well, look, if we're having a conversation right
now. You don't accept that it is the case that the Christian God exists, do you, Alex?
Let's come to that question in a moment. Let me just finish this thought.
Do you accept it? Well, you don't. Okay, good. So we're going to set that worldview. We're going to set that.
But what different? This is one of the things that bugs me the most about these guys, and this is old school precept. What difference does it make if one acknowledges this particular worldview, the essence of the Christian worldview, in which God is the necessary precondition for intelligibility? So what? I've asked him this many times, and he ducks and dives every single time. Let's say that you're right, and the grounds of all intelligibility are, in fact, a deity. And it turns out it's the God of the Bible. What difference does that make? This God is also responsible for absolutely everything else. The fact that I'm confused about that God is due to God. Way to go, Darth. You just created Calvinists.
that worldview. We're going to set that worldview aside. Now, if you're going to come to me, you're presupposing, in order to reason with me, you're presupposing the regularity of nature in order to reason. You're presupposing that there are fundamental laws of logic. Do those things exist, Alex?
The laws of logic?
Yeah, do they exist?
Which ones?
The law of non-contradiction.
I'm not sure that it does.
Okay, good. Then why should I assume that anything that you say is meaningful if the law of non-contradiction doesn't hold at all times and all places?
Well, why would you think that the law of non-contradiction is a presupposition of?
This is interesting. I'm going to rewind that a little. Well, probably just take that back for him to repeat that. But no, I'll just let this go on. Let me take it back just a couple seconds here. I'm going to think about something that was just stated there.
Logic. Do those things exist, Alex?
The laws of logic?
Yeah. Do they exist?
Which ones?
The law of non-contradiction.
I'm not sure that it does.
Okay, good. Then why should I assume that anything that you say is meaningful if the law of non-contradiction doesn't hold at all times and all places?
Well, why would you think that the law of non-contradiction is a presupposition of me saying something meaningful?
Well, because if the law of non-contradiction doesn't hold at all times and all places, then if I say to you that the ball is in the street, then how would that be meaningful if at the same time and in the same sense the ball is not in the street, could coexist? How would that be meaningful, Alex?
If the law of non-contradiction was false, that just means that something is a contradiction. It doesn't mean that that particular example is a contradiction.
Right, but you see, how would you establish that there are any contradictions, Alex?
Well, okay. So do you know what the liar paradox is?
Yeah, I've heard it before.
This is funny.
Do you want to explain what it is then?
That's where the statement where the individual says this statement or everything I say is a lie?
Right. This sentence is false.
Right.
Maybe that's a contradiction.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so what I'm saying to you is, how are we going to establish when contradictions are valid or are valid or invalid, Alex?
Well, that's a very difficult question, but maybe the liar paradox is a contradiction.
Well, how do I know? How do I know if contradictory states of affairs can coexist? Then how do I know when you're making a statement that it's meaningful, that its negation couldn't coexist?
If I say
what are you going to appeal to? Your sense perception, Alex?
I think you misunderstand.
Has Darth ever done any kind of reading or exploration? I mean, maybe he has at this point, because I don't know if he argues this particular thing quite this way anymore. But this just seems to me like anybody who's kind of familiar with like quantum physics, that notion. What do they call that? It's not quantum entanglement, but what is superposition? I think. Would sort of this, and it seems to me like this reliance on classical logic as being the sort of like the bedrock of everything that works. It's like there's issues to classical logic that there've been refinements over time. It's not, it wasn't the end all be all of logics. There's more than that.
Understanding the role that non-contradiction plays, you don't appeal to it to decide whether or not. Look, if I say the ball is in the street or whatever your example was, you don't know that it's not also in the street just because you know the law of non-contradiction is true, right? The law of non-contradiction isn't normative; it's descriptive. If there are contradictions, it's false, right? And you lose nothing. You aren't appealing to it. I'll tell you when you appeal to it.
How do you know that? How do you know that contradictory states of affairs?
You had to say, "How do you know that?" 4 times. I counted and took a shot for each one. I'm kidding.
Can't exist, Alex.
I think maybe they could.
Okay, so it's
how do you know they can't?
How? Because the God of the Bible has revealed that
here we go,
has
preaching time.
The world in such a way that comports with His mind, and in His mind.
And how would you possibly go about laying that out in any way that was reliable, other than to just go right back to begging the question?
The law of non-contradiction is true.
Because He is the Lord of non-contradiction. He cannot lie. He cannot speak or utter anything that is a contradiction.
That doesn't mean that.
Then why is it He's created in our world? Why is it that He's created us with the ability to say something like the sentence is false? He's the Lord of non-contradiction. Yet I can contradict myself by uttering that statement. So did that come from the devil?
The law of non-contradiction is false. Somebody's ability to lie or not doesn't have
any.
Well,
when I say he cannot lie, that's the starting point where we establish that when God speaks and He creates things, it says that God spoke and He brought everything into existence. That
what do you think the law of non-contradiction is?
You're not letting me finish. The bottom line is this: is if a contradiction could possibly coexist with a statement, why would that statement be meaningful, Alex?
If a statement being meaningful or not is independent of whether the law of non-contradiction is true.
Oh, okay. So a statement can be meaningful if its negation could coexist?
Yeah, if I say P and not P, that's false. It's maybe if the law of non-contradiction is true, it's necessarily false, but it's meaningful.
So if I said to you, the ball is in the street, but at the same time and in the same sense, the ball is not in the street, is that meaningful?
It's meaningful because its negation is true. How could its negation be true if it was negating something that was meaningless?
Alex, you're not getting what I'm saying.
No, I don't think you're getting what I'm saying. Can you negate things that are meaningless?
A statement can only be meaningful if its negation cannot be simultaneously true.
I'll challenge you to point any logic textbook anywhere that says that.
Okay, so in other words, if I said to you, the moon is made out of green cheese, but it is also not made out of green cheese, is that a meaningful statement?
Yeah, of course it is. It's false, so it's meaningful.
No. Why is it false?
Because the state of affairs, it describes an impossible state of affairs.
Here we go. Okay, so Alex.
This is going to be, I love how excited he is that Alex used the term impossible. And just listen to the sound of the rake handle hitting him right in the face as he steps on us.
If something is impossible, that means that there is an absolute that cannot be violated, right?
Oh.
I don't know what that means, an absolute that can't be violated.
That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't have anything to do with possibility or impossibility.
Okay, when you say something is impossible, does that mean that there's an absolute that could not be otherwise?
Well, you're just saying the same thing again. I don't understand what you mean by an absolute.
Okay, well, then tell me what you mean that something is impossible.
It means really, in traditional terms, something being impossible means nothing more than it being contradictory, right?
So, why does that make it impossible?
Well, that's what impossible means.
Are you, when you say something is impossible, you're saying that it cannot be?
I'm saying, well, only if so. In classical way of thinking about things, because the law of non-contradiction is true, because you're already starting at that point, then impossible just means.
Well, how do I know the law of non-contradiction is true at all times?
It's a very difficult question. I don't know how you could know that. And if you think that it's true, then let me know how you think it's true.
Okay. So basically, you assume the law of non-contradiction.
No, I don't, because I'm quite happy to consider that maybe the liar sentence is false.
Okay, good. So how do we know when the law of non-contradiction?
How do we? You know that he's starting to. He's anxious to win at that point when he, how do you, who do you, and he's those weird noises coming out of the old fart. He starts to stutter. Yeah, there's sugar in the gas tank, folks. He's petering out. It's funny because that used to be something that I would always kind of clue into when I saw these kind of back in the day for the first time, and he doesn't really, with Discord, he never really gets to that point because he doesn't seem to have the patience to do one of these as long as this.
And I don't think there's an easy answer to that question. You seem to want an easy answer.
Okay. Then why would you object to any statement that might seem to be contradicted by another state of affairs?
Well, just because there's one contradiction doesn't mean that there's another one.
You're not answering my question. Why would you object to any statement that I might make that might contradict another state of affairs? Why would you object to that, Alex?
Well, let's just split two things up, right? And the first, you might think that if there was a contradiction, any contradiction, then everything would be contradictory. And I think that that's fallacious. So I wouldn't be able to appeal to that.
Well, how can you determine that anything?
I'm glad he pointed that out because it took him a while. It took Alex he could have probably pointed that out earlier, but he didn't. But this idea that if the one contradiction is possible, then everything is contradictory doesn't seem to follow.
It's fallacious, Alex.
Well, it seems
based upon what, Alex? Are there?
If you're not going to let me finish, then I won't be able to explain why.
All right. Are there any absolutes that can't be violated, Alex?
What do you mean by an absolute?
I think he's also increased the frequency with how many times he's mentioning Alex's name. I don't know if you noticed that. I think he's dropped it like 5 times in like a handful in as many seconds.
It can't be violated. Well, you're just saying the same thing.
Something that cannot be otherwise.
As in,
yeah.
I can't imagine it being otherwise.
Aren't some of the things that you are saying to us here today predicated that there are some absolutes?
The word absolutes, I just don't know what it does in this context. It's just opaque to me. I don't know what you mean.
Oh, Alex, please, seriously, dude.
See, this is the classic thing. I think the reason he does this is because he wants to act like he like everyone knows this. Anybody who's learned about philosophy understands this perfectly. But then, but if they're a theist, they're going to try to get cagey with it because they know they're cornered. They've been caught by this towering intellect, and his great big overstuffed diaper. The issue here that I see, this has been going on for years now, but this is the beginning of it. This is when he gets really super obnoxious about this. The other PhDs that he's talked to have had just as difficult a time with the way he throws around this term absolute, and then refuses to go into any kind of explanation as to what he means by that. Right? He just means, all he means by absolute is irrefutable. That's all he means. I don't think he understands what it could possibly entail in any other sense. It just means it's irrefutable. You cannot deny the absolute. And that's what provides order and sensibility for everything. And anything else is whatever difficulties that entails in his worldview and philosophy, he's just going to explain away. But the best that I've ever heard from him is that that's all it is. But he will never admit that when he says absolute, he means irrefutable. It's irrefutable in the sense that there just is a God and you can't prove him wrong. Therefore, it's irrefutable and absolute. So I win. I won before we even started talking. And if you want an example of people with that kind of attitude, just go take a look at some of those Seitan Bruggencate videos where he tells people at the beginning of their discussions and debates that he's already won because the atheists showed up. Super fucking obnoxious.
Well, look, if I say, okay, so there are some transcendental, do you know what that means? I don't know what that means. People say it.
Okay,
right?
Alex, so you don't know if there's anything that's absolute?
Well, maybe you can just unpack the term absolute for me in
something that cannot be otherwise. Is truth absolute, Alex?
What would that have to do? Like, it has to be something that cannot be otherwise. Is truth absolute? That makes no sense.
The definition of absolute sounds a lot like the definition for true.
Yeah.
Is truth true?
Yeah,
absolute.
But he's not using it just as if it's true. It's irrefutable. It's irrefutable. It's necessarily the case that the Christian God is all, or at least the basis for all. He gets a little flaky on that too.
Is it absolutely true, Alex, that if something is true, it cannot simultaneously be false?
Well, no, because I think the liar paradox
could it be true.
The liar paradox could be both. For all I know, it's epistemically possible to me that.
Okay, good. So if you feel that I'm making some type of contradictory statements or expressing contradictory ideas, then what would be your basis of objection? Well, it violated the law of non-contradiction?
So, well, the law of non-contradiction, obviously, if the liar paradox is true, isn't a universal truth. It doesn't cover all cases.
Oh, okay. So I'm free to make contradictory statements sometimes?
Please, Darth, please.
Hey, okay. Is this JD?
Yeah. Hey,
Antonio
JD.
and Carlos.
Okay, hold on a second. Well, I'm the moderator in the room. JD, you're a very bad boy, and you misbehave yourself. And if you want me to remove you, Hogtie, I will. Please don't interrupt me. JD, I've told you before, due to your past bad behavior and acting like a little adolescent, you're not welcome in my room. So bye-bye.
Okay, look, let me make this analogy that might help.
One moment. So Antonio and Carlos said he should be here.
No, wait,
JD is not. When I'm a moderator in the room, JD, who is a known clown and troll, is welcome in here. I welcome Alex in here because Alex, being that he teaches philosophy, is highly regarded in these circles. I happen to like Alex very much, and I enjoy listening.
He's highly regarded in those circles. Yeah, he's basic. That's the skin of the leopard that Darth wants to take and wear. He doesn't respect Alex. He never has. He talks shit about him all the time after these discussions. He wants to beat him because if he can beat him, then he can tell everybody else that it follows I beat Alex Malpass. Therefore, I also beat all of you by default. He does think like that.
Thank you very much. JD is a well-known troll. He's not welcome in the room. Go ahead, Alex.
So, I do have a question for Alex. I don't want to interrupt, but I do have a question for Alex.
Let me just say this one example just to put it out there. I don't expect DD's going to accept this idea, right? But if you said that the laws of Newtonian physics were false, say Newton's law of gravity is false, strictly speaking, that's what general relativity says, that it's false. But that doesn't mean that you can't use the Newtonian equation to figure out whether or not you should jump out the window. It's still usable.
Okay, I'm just
Okay, we have a new person. Anaya, could you introduce yourself, please?
I have to take.
Hey, Antonio, Darth muted me for no reason whatsoever. He just says he doesn't like
Wait. I gave my controls to both.
Okay. Right, this is why what happens. We have the trolls ruining the conversation.
Why do you think I didn't want him in here in the first place?
Yeah, okay. All right. So anyway, so
Antonio's sticking up for himself in a way I haven't heard in a long time. I wonder if Antonio remembers what it was like to have balls.
Alex, when you say that Newtonian physics, it works, right? Is that what you said?
My analogy wasn't just that it works. My analogy was that there's a sphere, you could say, a sphere in which the Newtonian laws are effectively true, right? So just because they're false in some respect doesn't mean that they're not usable at all.
I'm gonna pause this. Wasn't multiple personality? Wasn't that Nate Brody? Before Nate Brody had like his own YouTube show.
What do you mean when you say effectively true? You mean there's an appearance of them working? How do you know how anything works, Alex? Are you presupposing that nature operates in some regular way?
Right back to the.
Sorry, let me interject. JD, can I ask you a favor? Please don't. Okay, I got to explain. I'm sorry for interrupting you guys' conversation, but there was a miscommunication in the side chat, which we've reviewed, and it was 100% my fault. It was my understanding that it was okay, and then JD did come in and offer that if he wasn't permitted to come in, that he would leave. So I'm going to ask JD, can you just?
It was honest miscommunication. I don't hold anything over your head about it. I let him stay, and then DD said he wanted him to go, so he was the mod while I was one of the mods while I was away, so he can't come in.
Yeah. So my suggestion.
JD's not going to be tolerated in this room while I'm in here.
So my suggestion, because Antonio has said like he's going to sort of go to DD's.
All right, let's drop it. Okay, let's drop it, Hogtie. Alex, when you say Newtonian physics might work in some ways, are you presupposing that nature works in some regular way?
Newtonian physics is an expression of nature working in a certain way.
How would you know that nature works in a certain way? How do you know that?
You just missed the nuance of that. It's an expression of nature working in a certain way.
All the events that you experience or see, or for that matter, collective humanity, are not simply the result of chance producing the same types of sequences.
Well, look, when you say "how do you know,"
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by know?
How are you able to determine that that's the case?
So knowing means what? Being able to determine that something.
Yeah, Alex, just answer the question.
Well, I mean, there's different concepts of knowledge, so different answers.
Alex, you know what I'm talking about.
Asserting someone else's, what someone else knows. Well, classy move from Darth Dawkins.
Well, I mean, I think it's quite a vague question. So, I mean,
Alex, does nature work in some regular way?
I can't prove that to you deductively, no. But
okay, so why should I accept your claim that Newtonian physics works?
Do you only?
Does he have a problem with the aspects of Newtonian physics that do describe things accurately? Like, okay, wouldn't that be definitionally from Darth Dawkins' worldview, revelation from his God?
Except things that are proven deductively.
What I find interesting is that the revelation of Newtonian physics, the stuff that people could build on, the stuff that worked and people built off from, that's clearly that must be revelation from God. But all the stuff that was wrong, that was incorrect, right? Or that I guess that's not revelation from God. Maybe that's sin nature of man. Funking up the signal or something.
Oh, we see. I'm not operating from your worldview.
Well, you just asked me why should you accept it? I mean, if you only
accept your statements.
Wait. If you only accept things that are deductively proven, you'll never accept anything that's inductively proven. But that's up to you. I mean, is that your stance? In which case, I can't prove it.
I'm asking you to justify your statements from within your worldview.
Yeah, but that's a neat dodge. I mean, Alex is trying to get into like commit to this. Like, how much do you dislike inductive logic? Darth not gonna. He's gonna dodge that with Malpass, mostly because I think he knows that Malpass can probably he's gonna school him.
Since you do not start with it is the case that the Christian God exists and that he has constructed the world in a certain way, that the world operates according to his laws. That
but you had to have subjective experience in order to conclude that. You didn't presuppose that. Everything that he did, everything that Darth Dawkins is doing right there, requires him to conclude God. The way he's demonstrating this. Now, there are ways to kind of get into the Van Tillian thing where it's the sort of the presuppositional logic of it. But what he's talking about, just sort of getting into sermon mode and trying to explain it like that, I think this is the second or third time in this discussion with Malpass, that way, It requires someone to have used their sense perception to experience the effects of that same God in the world around them, and then to infer that God is making those things real. You don't presuppose that God the same way you would presuppose your sense experience. So then, from his worldview, Darth's here, how do you know that that sense experience is true? How do you know you're experiencing God's effects? How do you know that God gave you those senses to experience in the first place?
You come to me as a skeptic, as an atheist,
Listen,
and you say to me that, well, Newtonian physics works in a certain way. How do you know that it works in a certain way, Alex?
Oh, this is painful.
I don't know deductively. I have not got deductive certainty.
Oh, okay.
So let me just see if I get your view right, though. So God revealed to you that nature works in an orderly fashion. Is that right?
God's revealed to everybody innately due to the fact that we're made in the image of God.
But what I'm asking about is what it is that he's revealed, right?
The interesting thing about this is that the foundation for this is induction. For Darth.
Let me give you an example. When God made Adam, within the first few moments of Adam walking around and thinking, he didn't need to learn or to assume that nature operates in a law-like way. The Bible has revealed that God has constructed our mind, being in the image of God, to understand that nature operates in a certain way.
Okay, great. So when Christians endowed with that knowledge find new things out inductively, why is it that they didn't just already know that, given the revelation from God?
Well, because not everything, new things that we learn are not what we would call our base core beliefs about the nature of reality.
Okay.
That are an innate endowment, and in the broader sense, a type of revelation.
So
that's some horse shit.
Not everything is revealed to you, right?
Of course not.
Okay, so let's take the law of gravity then. If you wanted to decide what the law of gravity was, you couldn't appeal to your revelation from God, could you?
No, what we understand is that we can use inductive reasoning based upon the fact that God has revealed that.
No. You're missing the point. Which inductive reasoning can you infer that?
I'm not against using inductive reasoning.
Sure. Okay. Neither am I. But listen, my point is this.
Alex, please don't interrupt me. I'm not opposed to inductive reasoning from within the context of the Christian worldview. But if you're going to appeal to inductive reasoning from outside the Christian worldview, I'm going to say, why should it have any merit? You're not using inductive reasoning from within the Christian worldview. You do not believe that there is an eternal God who has created a regular and orderly existence. But you believe that the world around you operates in some orderly law-like way, and you're doing so based upon your sense perception and inductive reasoning. Now, could you be wrong about that, Alex?
You could be, Dawkins. You had to presuppose that those very same things in order to conclude the God that you're talking about, the God that you claim is the source of those same things.
Yeah, I said before, it's not deductive certainty. Okay.
Okay. And then why should there be any merit in your conclusions then?
So it's not deductive. This is just hilarious. Like, oh my God. There's a real inductive problem to what Dawkins is doing, but because Alex can't provide a deductive proof for his worldview, then Dawkins's worldview by default must be true, despite the fact that it's built on a whopper of a fallacy.
There wouldn't be deductive certainty in them, and if that's what you're looking for, you won't get it. But let me go back to, because you were saying something interesting, and I want to just explore that idea a little bit more. So given that God guarantees that there are uniformities in nature, which is fine, I understand that that's your worldview. My question is, if you're faced with a situation where, like, imagine you've never seen any black swans before, how would you be in a different situation to me when faced with having to decide whether the inference from all swans are white, so all observed swans are white, to all swans are white? How could you know whether that inference was correct or not? I don't see that you could, even given your worldview. Is that right or wrong?
I'm not really understanding your question.
So
Of course you're not. Of course you're not. And I don't know that he's actually really dodging here or being dishonest. I don't think he gets this. I don't think he gets this now.
Let's say you're faced with an induction. You have to do an induction. You do them every day anyway, right? When you step out of your door, you wonder whether you're going to get hit by some meteorite or stray car or something, right? You reason that the chances are low, right? But only because they haven't happened before.
In the Christian worldview, we're justified in using inductive reasoning until and if we see exceptions to those consistencies, because we know, and it's been revealed by the God of creation.
No, you're missing the point, Darth.
Okay, go ahead. What am I missing?
look, so let's
So he's got to go right back into preaching because he doesn't have a way out of this.
say let's pick an example, right? So let's say it's you opening your door and walking out and hoping that you don't get hit by a car, right? Maybe you're walking out into the road without looking, but you know that it's a really quiet road and there's never any cars on there, right? You're taking it, you're basing your assumption that you're not going to get run over because no one's ever got run over there before. You've never seen a car. Let's say you've never seen a car on the road before, right? Now, even in a Christian worldview, you could be wrong about that. Like there might just be a car here today anyway, right? That's true, isn't it?
Yeah, but being hit by a car, the car in and itself would be the product of agency and not solely and only physical necessity, Alex.
But you're missing the point still. The idea is that you can't know in advance for any given induction whether it's going to be successful.
I can know in advance that God has created the world to operate in a regular law-like way. And
but you didn't know that God created black swans in advance. The fact that he is intentionally missing this. I think he doesn't get it, but he is dodging this so hard. He does not want this realization to kick in.
I see a certain number of consistencies. I'm justifying that belief, and if I see an inconsistency. Now, but here's the bottom line.
No. You're wrong about
Alex.
You're
Here's
wrong.
the bottom line. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether hold on a second. It doesn't matter whether you think that my conclusions are justified, because there is no justification in your worldview.
Well, no, you're dodging now because you were wrong about that.
No, I'm not dodging.
Okay,
what I'm doing is
he specifically asked him, how do you justify the same kind of inductive issue that we're dealing with? How would you know one way or the other if both of us are having to deal with like the all swans are white issue? He hasn't provided that. Now he's just saying like, well, you don't have any grounds to say one way or the other. He's right back to begging the question again.
What I am doing is I'm coming back to
you're changing the subject.
Okay, you're interrupting me. Well, I'm not changing the subject. The subject was you were trying to justify that you could be rational and that there is a basis for rationality. So obviously,
no, he was actually asking you. He was challenging a portion of your worldview, which you don't seem to think is a problem. And Alex sniffed out a big fat weakness in it, and you are looking to ignore it.
Speaking to me and analyzing what I'm saying in the Christian worldview, you're presupposing that rational thought can be had, right, Alex? How is rational thought possible in your worldview? Are there absolutes that will guarantee rationality?
It's really obvious that you're moving away from the topic.
I'm not moving away. We're going back
to about you justifying an induction, and now we're not. And that's because you changed the subject.
Alex,
I haven't changed the subject, and we're the only two people.
I'm going back to my original questions with
you. Exactly.
You're going back to a question that wasn't when you started talking with Alex Malpass, and anyone that remembers this from the beginning, Malpass wanted to talk about Dawkins' problems with induction.
Changing the subject back.
No, I'm not changing the subject, Alex.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to stop now because I've made my point. I'm not going to play again. We talked about that original point. I've exposed that you don't understand this issue with induction.
Okay, so in other words, Alex, let me ask you a question. Have I committed a fallacy in your view?
I think you've not committed a fallacy, but there are other ways that you can show that you don't understand something.
Okay, Alex, are there logical absolutes?
Well, for the fourth umpteen time, I don't know what you mean by absolute.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, in order for you to object into my line of reasoning, mustn't my reasoning violate some standard?
No, dingbat, because you already if you've established this is really disgusting because Malpass has actually done what Dawkins usually asks people to do, right? Malpass is not operating outside of Dawkins' worldview because in his worldview, and Malpass is pointing this out, is the same issue with this whole all swans are white kind of issue. Then you run into the one black swan kind of thing, kind of throws that off. And Dawkins, for some reason, doesn't want to deal with this. He's still just going to continue to insist that somehow the revelation means that he can know certain things for certain. But it's a useless claim at this point. Malpass has pointed out what's wrong with this kind of thinking, especially given the way Dawkins continues to either totally misunderstand induction and inductive logic, or if he does understand it better than he's letting on, completely misrepresent it here. But now he just wants to go back into this whole thing. Well, from my worldview, I have a foundation, and I haven't heard you give me a foundation from your worldview. Therefore, I don't have to listen to anything that you say. This is really, really just fundamentally crappy communication. if all you're going to do is force him back into his worldview, where his worldview apparently lacks a foundation and is nothing but chaos, and your worldview is orderly because that's provided for by the Big Daddy Yahweh, okay, well then there's no reason for you guys to even try to entertain each other's ideas or look at any of those kinds of things, because you're just getting back into the world of external critiques. But when Malpass bridged that gap and was talking about a problem of induction that exists within both of your worldviews, Darth Dawkins ran from that and wanted to immediately switch it back around to, wait, by what standard? By what standard? The childish oinking of the classic presuppositional apologist.
Well, let's look at what you were saying then. And
Are there standards of thought, Alex?
But you don't want to talk about the actual detail of...
What does that mean? Sorry to pause it again. Are there standards of thought? I think he asked this more, too.
Question, man.
Alex, are there standards of thought that cannot be violated in a rational discussion?
Antonio, who do you think is avoiding Hughes?
Are there standards of thought that can... He already presented the liar's paradox at the beginning of this conversation.
Question?
No, he asked him about standards, and he didn't deal with that question he asked him.
Okay, there are lots of different standards for rational thought.
Watching different conversations then.
And what would be a prime standard of thought that you would consider cannot be violated and be rational? Are there any absolute rules of thought, Alex, that can't be violated?
Are there any absolute rules of thought that can't be violated? Mm-hmm. Maybe, but I'm not convinced that there are.
Okay, good. Then if there are no absolute rules of thought, then you have no foundation or basis to object.
That doesn't make any sense. If there were rules of thought and they could be violated, that means somebody could misuse them or abuse them. That doesn't mean that they still wouldn't hold up. Maybe I'm missing something there, but it seems like Darth ran ahead with something that didn't follow from even what he presented.
To anything that I said.
Yeah, that's not what I said. I mean, I said maybe, and you're going, oh well, you're referring.
Oh, okay. Well, Alex, what?
No, listen, Darth. Look, you really obvious.
Alex caught him in something that is classic, because Darth does this worse than anybody else. Alex answered maybe. I don't think so, and Darth basically takes that as the answer that he needs in order to straw man and then rush to whatever conclusion that he needs to in order to pigeonhole somebody into something completely ludicrous. And usually outside the scope of what they even answered.
Dodged. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you more about the induction problem we were talking about a minute ago. And if you don't want to talk about that, then I'm just going to go off and finish cooking, because I don't have to be here talking to you.
I was hoping to ask you a question, though.
No, I appreciate you stopping in. By the way, I've enjoyed every time I've listened to you on Hangouts.
Okay, great. Well, look, I'm happily talk to you again more about that particular.
Sure, no problem.
But can I ask time for one question for me?
Looking back on this, he probably shouldn't, because one of the things that Darth did back in this day was look for people like Alex Malpass, where he could quote unquote school, so he could build up this reputation, right? But what actually happened was that people found out about these things, and obviously they've archived them here. And Alex Malpass has written on his blog site about his encounters with Darth Dawkins, and then broken down where he thinks the arguments go wrong, where Darth Dawkins isn't, doing where he's making mistakes and stuff. But what ended up carrying the day was all the shit talk, all the backslapping, all the commiserating with his crew on not only here with guys like Antonio and there were other dingbats. But then by the time he kind of got out of the Google Hangout thing and left for the Discord servers, Darth Dawkins' tendencies towards that got even worse, to the point where now it's pretty obvious that he's incapable of keeping a consistent picture. He will tell someone like Skylar Fiction, point out all the PhDs that he's argued with. But then at the same time, he's had multiple discussions where he's focused most of his time belly aching about how he was treated talking to those same PhDs. So all he managed to do here is, I really like the opportunity to talk to you, Alex. Yeah, because at this point he was trying to make a name for himself. He was he'd been on for 10 years or whatever. At this point, he'd been on for 6 years. And he's crawling out of Pal Talk into the Google Hangouts and YouTube broadcasts. And this is before he got good and obnoxious. But this was sort of really, this is when he started kind of like honing everything down into the kind of, what is it? I think his fans think he's playing like 4-dimensional chess, but it's just a shit show.
You want to ask me a question?
Yeah, is that okay? Oh, okay, you gotta go. That's fine. I can talk ask you another time. So fairly early in the discussion, when you guys were talking about, it seemed to me that foundationalism was kind of where it was initially going. When for the third, when you asked on the third occasion that you asked Darth to provide some justification for his bold claim that he asserts that it's a Christian God that exists and has created the world in such a way that et cetera, et cetera. On the third time that you asked him that same question, were you surprised that he still didn't answer it? Was that, based on your experience, was that an unusual thing?
Well,
wait a minute, didn't answer what?
Well, so Didi makes this claim that in his view the Christian God exists, and without this statement being true, without the Christian God existing, without the Christian God existing and having created the world in such a way that this regularity exists, or however he chooses to word it, but without that statement being true, there simply is no ability to reason. And Alex had asked him to provide some support for that declaration that there exists no reality.
No, I'm not surprised that wasn't forthcoming, because I've never heard anybody offer that.
Well, is there a basis, a firm foundation in an alternate reality where we deny the Christian God upon which we can reason? Is there one exist?
Doesn't even get
the question instead of
Look, even if, let's say that Darth's worldview is correct, right, and that we all have reasoning as a result of that. Well, either there's a proof that the Christian God is the necessary precondition for the intelligibility of everything, or there isn't. I mean, if there is, then let's hear it.
No, you're not understanding. Without the existence of the Christian God, there can be no reasoning.
Okay, so let's assume that the Christian God exists and hear the proof that it's necessary.
Alex, go back 2 sentences. Go ahead.
There might not be one. That's possible.
No, I asked him to go back because you interjected. Go back.
The claim is that God is the necessary precondition for the intelligibility of, let's say, human experience. Right? That's the presuppositional claim. Well, if God existed, I mean, I'll grant you the sufficiency part of the claim. Right? Let's just say that if God existed, then we would have rationality. My question is, let's assume that that's true. Right? Now my question is, so we're all Christians, we're all rational. Right? Let's just assume that's the case. Now my thought would be, well, how do I know that there's no other way of having rationality? Because the claim, after all, is that it's necessary for the Christian God for there to be rationality. So what's the proof of that? Where's the argument?
Yeah. Well, the proof is that without God existing, there can be no other proof.
No, that's a statement. That's the claim. I'm asking you.
It is a claim, Alex.
Yeah, and what's the proof of the claim?
The proof is without God, there can be no proof.
That's a statement.
The claim. What's the proof of that?
How could you, Alex? Tell me. Let's take a look. Alex, could we know?
I think I heard Antonio try to say like modus something, and anytime that's come up, it's always funny.
Know some things in such a way that we couldn't be wrong if the Christian God exists.
Are you giving me the proof now? Does it
No, I'm asking you a question. I'm trying to answer your question.
Well, no, because a proof isn't a question, right?
Okay, but you see, a proof presupposes that there are certain absolutes that would undergird the possibility of proofs, right, Alex?
Okay, well, let's just assume that that's true for the sake of continuing.
Okay.
But that was assumed from the beginning. He already assumed that. We'll assume your God. We'll assume that it's the foundation for everything, including the intelligibility of all of reality. There should be a proof for that. Why isn't there one?
Good. So without that, okay, in order to have proofs, you would have to have certain absolutes existing, right, Alex?
Well, let's just keep going. Okay, so let's say that.
Do you agree with that, Alex?
Let's say I do.
All right, good. Well, in the Christian worldview, we are endowed by God's revelation. Right?
There we go.
Now, when you deny the Christian God, how do you establish that there are any absolutes anyway for there to be proof?
So this just comes down to, look, on the Christian worldview, we have an account for it. And how do you have an account for it if the Christian worldview?
Well, there cannot be independent verification ultimately of anything unless we have an ultimate verifier such as the Christian God.
Prove it.
Yeah, prove that.
You see, he has revealed that. But you see,
no.
That's interesting. He can't prove it, but God's proved it. I don't know if anyone caught that. He's proved it. Well, God's proved it. Where?
I haven't been.
No, here's what you're not understanding. Okay, it's because when God spoke to Eve and He said, "Do not eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, lest you will die." Okay, you either had to accept the revelation or you didn't.
Yeah,
you're making.
No, now he's using revelation like someone would use the term claim. God made a claim that if one eats of this fruit from this tree, then they will surely die. But from God, it's revelation, meaning it's a fact. So How does a human prove that?
When I present to you the revelation of God, God's revelation, the God of the Bible's revelation, is self-attesting, self-authenticating, and self-verifying. If you are,
and if that's the case, then given that, and that God is the undermining thing, the undergirding thing of all of reality, we should have a proof for that, other than a claim.
let me ask you this: are you asking for independent verification of the revelation of the Christian God, Alex?
No, I was asking you for a proof of a particular claim that you made.
Right, and proof would be a means of verification, right, Alex?
But wouldn't the proof and the means of verification be consistent with God's revelation? If Darth Dawkins believes what he's saying, I don't understand why he has an issue with this.
I mean, if you've not got the proof, Darth, then that's fine.
Alex, I asked you a question.
If you ask me a question, like, how do I prove something, and I just continually ask you questions in return, you wouldn't be cool with that. You would not be cool with that.
Alex,
It's not a proof. There's another thought I could add to it.
Hold on a second, Hantai.
Yeah, I can hold on. Yeah.
Alex, if you ask me for a proof or some type of intellectual verification of the revelation of the Christian God, that did not start with the revelation of the. And when I say revelation, I just don't mean it by just the Bible. I'm talking about knowing something that we cannot be wrong, which is an endowment by God. Okay, so I'm using a broader sense of the term revelation.
I don't think you know that.
Okay, now
that's a different. That's
how do you know that claim you just said?
Endowment by God. Okay, so I'm using a broader sense of the term revelation.
I don't think you know that.
Okay, now
how do you know that, Dawkins? How do you know that claim you just said? How do you know that?
Hold on a second, Alex. By just the Bible, I'm talking about that knowing something that we cannot be wrong, which is an endowment by God. Okay, so I'm using
knowing something that we cannot be wrong due to an endowment by God.
Using a broader sense of the term revelation.
I don't think.
Okay, if he's trying to say the broader, from my understanding of this theologically, there are two kinds of revelation: special and general. Special is something like direct communication from God, like him telling you not to eat produce. Or reading his book written by lots of people in strange languages from a long time ago, which are loaded with not I don't want to say contradictions, but loaded with doublets. And then the general revelation, which would be nature itself, right? General revelation would be that aspect of like sense perception, experiencing the world around us, concluding God from the effects of his creation, yada yada yada. Okay, which one of those? How does one demonstrate that either one of those is something that we know? Like, because he's trying to say, in a broader sense, revelation is something that we know for certain due to an endowment by God. Like what? Now he's actually conflating general and special revelation by saying that nonsense. I didn't actually notice this before when I saw this one, but that's pretty fucking bad. I wonder if he's actually well, no, he doesn't reflect. Never mind.
How do you know that?
Okay, now
how do you know that, Dawkins? How do you know that claim you just said? How do you know that?
Hold on a second, Alex. If you were saying prove the revelation of God, do you mean that I start someplace else without first that it is the case that the Christian God exists? Is that what you mean?
Well, you can make those types of arguments.
No, I asked, it was a question, Alex.
I could ask, yeah, sure. Well, I get that it's a question. I asked you a question ages ago that you've not answered.
Are you asking for an independent verification of the revelation of the Christian God, other than accepting the revelation as the starting point?
You've said that the answer no. There's another way I can phrase the question that might help. If you asked actually the question,
why don't you let Alex answer for himself?
Listen, I have to go now anyway, so.
All right. Well, Alex, thank you for coming. I know it got a little heated, but I do appreciate you coming.
I don't understand why he had a problem with that. It seems consistent to me that if that God is the source of all intelligibility of reality around us and of all of these things that we use in order to verify certain things, like modus swolens and modus tonens. Thank you all for the variations. That you would have a proof, and that would be even more consistent with it. Darth actually seems to be pushing away from that and saying, well, you're just already wrong-headed because you're asking for some kind of independent verification of God using a logic that's alien, that's separate from God. But you don't like the implication of that? Darth.
And even though we don't agree on certain things, I don't disrespect you. I really enjoyed listening to you on the Hangouts. And
okay, we'll talk again at some point.
All right. Well, thanks for dropping in. It was good of you to come in.
All right.
He's a good egg, I think the expression is.
No, Alex is a nice guy. I like Alex. Good guy.
Yeah.
That was a great conversation.
There's another way.
Well, that's it for that. So yeah, that's the beginning of him. Those long ones are pretty good because that's when you can see him kind of like losing track, losing the thread on his own stuff. All right, folks. Let me see here. I think what I'm going to do, I'll open this up for a bit since I'm not hosting anything right now. A while since I've been on, so if anybody wants to come in, ask questions, bring up any points or anything like that, I'm not going to keep this on for too much longer. It's been on for just under 2 hours. It's pretty good. We pin that. If anybody would like to come in real quick, I'll probably wrap this up in a few minutes here. Let's see. Darth has to say face at the end with celebrities. Yeah. So, fortunately, I'll probably get into one more of the Malpass videos. There's one that's like 3 hours long. I don't think I'd probably do a review of that one unless it was enough interesting in it that I want to break it up. But there are a few kind of floating around. There's a YouTube user named Ask Yourself that has had a couple of joint conversations with Malpass and Darth Dawkins. Hey AJ, how's it going?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Not bad. Anything new?
I was listening earlier. I was over helping a friend paint a rental house, so I was not able to participate, but I was listening in, and I was actually earlier in the week watching that Alex Malpass video, so I'm at least familiar with the subject matter. But yeah, it's nice to see Alex handle everything as gracefully as I've seen anyone handle Darth.
Yeah, and he's usually stayed like that, which is kind of odd. Like in conversations that they've had more recently, like a year or so ago, he still more or less kind of keeps his cool. Like it doesn't really matter. Like it's like he's talking to his like a relative's less than adequate child. Yeah, he's just like trying to look. I'm trying to explain this to you in a way, and all I'm getting from you is a bunch of static and a bunch of griping. Yeah, Maya, I agree. If Darth ever said my name, I'd crawl right out of my skin. Yeah, it always, like, if he says my name, there's a certain amount of schadenfreude in the fact that I know I'm living rent-free in that head, but at the same time, I don't like to hear him mention my name either, even my username. So fortunately, he does not know my real name. I don't want any of his creepy trolls loosened upon me.
I did get called out by one of his minions earlier well, I guess last week he was trying to accuse me of avoiding and dodging Darth. I'm like, to the best of my knowledge, I've never even been in a room with Darth. I was like, I don't know how I'm avoiding him. I was like, but if he ever wants to find me, I'm over at Rascals.
You know what's made it really easy to avoid Darth has been the fact that Blackout blacked him out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, everything went down a little different than what I had predicted, because I had been anticipating Darth going over to Reformation and just absolutely lighting Blackout up and burning that bridge to the point where he would never get back. But he, I think, got lucky in that Reformation shut down or whatever. And I don't even know what the story is behind that. All I know is apparently it's not online right now. And,
yeah, I thought I heard something like that. I think Darth Dawkins Debunk put something out there like that, and I didn't know what was going on there either.
Well, I saw there was a link somewhere somebody had, or I think I just Googled it. I was Googling the Reformation server and found it and went there, and it showed that it was offline, like you couldn't get in, do anything. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. And all the rest of them showed up as online. So I was expecting Darth to burn that bridge, but I think he got lucky and never got the opportunity to. So he may still end up back at PNR before all is said and done.
Probably will. That's good. Somebody could send me a link. Maybe I can get back into PNR. I mean, they should bring him in, but they should get rid of the stuff like the attack dog and crap. Because clearly, given him like the ability to control 99% of the channel was not enough for him. Like he needed 104%. like he's just nuts. Like no, I want you to get rid of this guy in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since I teased it in the chat, I'll go ahead and give you a quick rundown on my uniformity of nature being self-contradictory or self-refuting. And there's a couple angles you can take on there, but the problem they run into is that, like, at least with Darth, he tries to paint reality as if everything would completely fall apart without God specifically intervening to maintain the uniformity of nature. So nature is only this way in virtue of God. Hey, Randolph.
Howdy, Randolph.
So nature is only this way in
Hello,
virtue
brother.
of God.
Hello, brother.
Keeping his fingers involved with everything.
Brother Funk.
Yeah.
So the problem is, if you look at that and go, okay, well, then you're saying if God didn't do that, then there wouldn't be uniformity of nature. But the problem is now you're saying, okay, God's not involved with that. So the fact that it would be chaos is now a brute fact in virtue of nothing, because you've just said God didn't do that. Like, that's not in virtue of God. That's in virtue of not God, to borrow a Psi 10 improper dichotomy. But
well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where they can't decide what they want. One of the things that they want is, it follows that if God has these qualities, then the world he created, we would expect to see this law-like, natural, orderly progression of all these things, because they operate according to this ordered, super logical, super intelligence, out there.
Yeah.
But then they would try to say, but then they want to have it on the other hand, like the kind of old world, ancient Near Eastern concept of everything is a complete and total fucking mess, except for the strength and power and will of this being that orders it. And without him, everything would just fly into complete and total disarray. And it's like, no, there would be an absence of anything.
Right.
Like the idea that, like, that's one of the things that I always find interesting. Like, well, there's no God, there would really be no intelligibility. It's like, no, based on everything that you've laid out, if there was no God, there'd be nothing. Intelligibility is the least of our worries. Like, we wouldn't be existing in some Mad Max magazine where it's just complete pandemonium, right? There'd be no pandemonium either.
That's very similar to the argument that finally, I used quite a few different arguments, troll arguments on Darth, but the one that finally got me kicked on site was something similar to that, where I argued that the foundation and ultimate of everything was randomness. And I argued that this was as good an explanation for the universe and the goings-on in the universe as God was. Right? So basically, there's no mechanism for the God, and there's no mechanism for things being random. And of course, it is possible in a near-internal universe that all states of affairs will happen. So therefore, it could appear that under a random system that, in fact, uniformity of nature was indeed something that happened, right? Because there's going to be a time in an infinite series of random events where events are going to look very similar to uniformity of nature,
right,
if not identical.
Yep.
And we couldn't tell that epistemically, so we couldn't tell the difference. So
we wouldn't know.
And that drove him absolutely up the fucking wall.
Well, what I've started doing is, when they start asking about, like, what's the fundamental ultimate, this, that, and the other, I'm like, well, first of all, demonstrate that I have to have a fundamental ultimate in my worldview, because I think almost all the pre-suppers do a bottom-up epistemology. They want to start with bedrock and say that's God, and then try to connect that all the way up. And I start on the other end. I start with reality. I start with what I see and dig down to try and eventually get to some epistemological bedrock, which I haven't gotten to yet. But I don't have. There is no ultimate. There's not one necessary in my worldview.
Right.
And
it's hard to troll it. It's hard to troll him without that, though. I only wanted to troll him. I didn't want to have any kind of conversation about proper epistemology or anything.
I've only got so much time.
Fair enough.
So another one I used was I said to him, "So you think that the existence of God is a fact, do you?" And he went, yeah. Are you an atheist? I went, oh, yeah, I'm an atheist. Oh, right, so you deny I deny the existence of God. So what do you think is ultimate? Oh, well, it could be a number of things, but, sure, I've got ultimates, Oh, yeah, but no, you can't weasel out of it. You got to tell me what it is. Well, if you really want to know, of course, it's truth. And that was it. Then he stumbled, right? How do you know that's true? Well, because it's not false.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, oh yeah, but yeah, that's circular. Well, yeah, of course it's circular because it's a foundation, right?
Yeah, you can't.
In
Yeah,
fact,
you can't
in
escape it.
fact, everything depends on it, including your worldview. So you can't have intelligibility without my truth, right? I mean, you said that it's the existence of God is a fact. In order for it to be a fact, it must be true.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next time I get to chat with him. The last time was he was on Skylar's channel, but he was in his Discord and his philosophy and religion Discord, or politics and religion. Sorry, politics and religion Discord. And so I popped in and we chatted for about 2 minutes, and then he had to go and I had to go. So he said he's looking forward to talking with me again. So that was the 5th time. So. Number 6, I am intending to use his own arguments against him. We'll see how that goes. I think it's going to probably frustrate him, but I'm going to try to do it in a way that he won't rage quit.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's good luck.
If you manage to do that, I do want to respond to Brian Johnson because he'd asked me.
It's Randolph these days.
Yeah, Randolph. Yeah, you're probably the only one that could. Brian had asked me, have you considered reviewing the recent debate between T-Jump and J. Robin, where T-Jump has mute powers? It's hilarious. I got a pretty good chuckle out of that, Brian. I might review that one in an upcoming video because that one was. I think Tom Rabbit called that one an immovable object meets an immovable object. Like the two of them are just loggerheads, like practically from the very beginning. Yeah,
that was a good one.
I will also say between the one that's because it's posted twice, it's on T-Jump's channel and it's also on Tom Rabbit's channel. And between the two comment sections there, I went on a pre-supper murdering spree where, like, if you see a comment that's got more than like 3 replies to it, it's probably me just absolutely eviscerating some poor pre-supper that's trying to do the, well, what's your ultimate? I don't need one, buddy. Keep trying.
Yeah.
Now, T-Jump, from what I've seen in the past, he's quite generous letting people talk and just not, I never expect to see any issue with him having control of a mute button. But from this recent comment just now, has something changed with him?
He's talked with J. Robin before, so T. Robin's done several stages on his own Discord server, and J. Robin will come in, and they'll have conversations, and vice versa. T. Jump's gone into some of J. Robin's stages, and they sometimes they get a little heated, and
J. doesn't get heated. I mean, he's done the same thing with Darth and a few other people.
Yeah,
if he thinks he's dealing with an idiot, then he's got a very short fuse.
So and then J. Robin likes to mute people if they do the kinds of, because T-Jump will keep talking to get his point through. He's not going to let somebody like stop his train of thought, and J. Robin will constantly mute him. So they'd built up enough of a back and forth that, like, yeah, by the time that one went through, and that one was weird because it was one of T-Jump was hosting it, J. Robin came in, and actually T-Jump lets J. Robin overtalk him quite a bit.
So if you read between the lines there, somebody mentioned something in there. This was one of those because T-Jump will do paid debates. And apparently this was one where I think J. Robin paid to debate T-Jump. Yeah. So I think
$50.
I think this was J. Robin trying to get muted so he could get his money back is what I suspect. I think there was some clause in there.
And that isn't going to work with Tom. No chance.
And I also have to ask, Peter, are you doing all right? You've been awful quiet over there, man.
If you noticed in the background, I'm hacking StreamYard. I've got all of you on separate monitors now.
Yeah.
I noticed you had a lot happen in the background there.
Been working on some stuff.
He's working.
Looks like Starship Enterprise is going on.
Yeah, kind of does a little bit.
Nope.
No,
not even close.
Oh, okay.
One of the Picard show ships. Nope.
Nope.
No, I was thinking of Janeway. He looks a little bit like Janeway.
If you would have said Call of Duty, then you would be close.
Ah, okay.
I was gonna say it looks like my laundry room, but then again, my laundry room's a little atypical.
Well, you've got a pretty awesome laundry room.
You have monitors and computers in your laundry room.
I have about 2/3 of a petabyte of storage in my laundry room. So yeah.
That's a level nerd that I need to accomplish.
It's more often called the server room than the laundry room, but it is where laundry gets done. So
he dries the laundry on the servers, and then the reusing the heat, you see.
The steam helps. Helps. Well, you can probably capture the steam and use that to power some kind of device.
I've thought about doing some air recirculation in there for various things, but it's the home lab has kind of grown out of what I expected it to be.
And just to clarify, you're not talking about the Steam game engine.
No.
I just got called for dinner. I'm going to try to come back after that. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to hearing more about this Darth Dawkins stuff. It's hilarious.
Always a pleasure, Randolph.
Thanks for joining, Randolph. Nice to see you.
Randolph,
See you later.
Thanks for the links on Twitter. They were cool.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I hope it helps. All right, bye everyone.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye. Well, since Randolph has left, I guess it's time to just wrap this up, right? Because the party's over.
He's just the nicest guy.
He really is. Before you go, I put in the private chat. That's the 2 hours chat with Matt Slick. The second one.
Oh, I just watched that the other day. It's so.
What's
good.
interesting is this is the one with the side chat in, so you can read the side chat going on at the same time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I thought you might find that a little more interesting than just. But it's Alex at his best as usual, you know.
Yeah, I'll have to take a
Except
look.
with this one, he's going in through scope fallacies.
Oh,
so credit to Matt Slick. He seems like he genuinely wants to learn more and find flaws in his argument and fix them. He seems to be a pretty genuine guy most of the time, at least compared to most other pre-suppers.
Fuck off. Okay, where do you live? Fucking Lapland or something. I don't mean to have a go at you. You're a nice guy, AJ.
AJ, when you listen to him, do you have the sound turned off?
No, I'm grading on the pre-supper curve. Like as far as pre-suppers go, he seems genuine. I should clarify.
Okay. No, he's not.
That's no. I think it's important. It's important to note that there is a curve.
I was in a hangout with him after this, Matt Slick, sometime after this, I have to say, and I said to him something like, "So you agreed at the end of one of your chats with Alex Malpass that you needed to reword your tag argument. Can you tell me how you changed it and what the current wording is?" And he went, "Well, just go to my Calm website." And I went, "Yeah, I've been to your Calm website, but it says the same argument as before the chat with Alex Malpass. So I'm just wondering if you did reword it." And he went, "Oh yeah, Alex agreed it was perfectly all right. I didn't really have to do anything." So, I mean, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We got one dislike on the video. I just assumed that's from Simus Funk because he was so offended by what AJ said about Matt Slick.
No, I would do that just for a friend anyway. I do that to all of Peter's videos.
Oh, good. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm pretty well. Tangelo, I think, showed up as Shroud of Turin, so I think he might be to blame for that. And he's already been deleted. I might have to check my user status. He's already been kicked out.
Simon is really consistent. He also dislikes the streams that I produce, so he does dislike his own streams at times.
Oh yes, yeah. If there's not enough,
it still feeds the algorithm for others in a way, but it also prevents him from being notified of his own stuff. I don't know how YouTube works. So
yeah, no. As far as I'm aware, it's just another ad, just another click on your video. And it's a participation click, I think it is. They call it.
Yeah.
But no, I have thumbed this up, and I wish for everybody else to thumb this up. So yeah, there you go.
I just did.
Thank you very much, and of course we'll be seeing each other in a week on Monday.
Yeah.
For our regular show, where we're covering the Austin Grand Prix of USA.
Yep. I'll be checking into that one because I want to see this Formula One happening in Texas. I watched your last one. I understood 2% of what you guys were talking about.
Okay. Well, watch the one in Texas and you'll understand a lot more.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're going to be whinging. Oh my God, F1 is going to be whinging.
Considering the track, that's going to be Formula One rallycross or something.
Yeah, I mean the track is in bad state. It really is. Considering they spent how many hundreds of millions on it.
Well,
Yeah.
Americans aren't good at maintaining roads. We're sort of like anti-Roman in that sense.
Okay, well, thank you, Jefferson, for the joke of next Monday's podcast.
You're welcome.
Okay, Peter. So when we do the flyby of the country, USA, we'll just say lots of like roads with cracks in.
I do have drone footage of Route 66, which is
great,
very decrepit at this point. There's not a lot left.
Yeah,
it looks like a varicose vein.
I have been down that road.
I was gonna say I've not done Route 66. I did US 60 from Virginia to Phoenix. It's a pretty good haul.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we drove down. We drove down from Toronto, New York, down to New Orleans, across the Mississippi, down to Texas, Fort Worth, and then across to California, up to. In fact, before then we went back up to North Dakota, then back down to California, and then up the West Coast, up to Washington.
That's the drive I'd like to make on the West Coast. Man.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. Well, the whole thing is just amazing. Can't remember how long it took. About 8 months.
Yeah. Well, folks, I'm going to wrap us up here. Thank you, Peter, Simus, and AJ for jumping in. Thanks to Randolph for stopping in real quick. Thanks to everybody in the chat for doing what you do. And thanks for watching. So like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff if you're so inclined. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I got to get out of here. I got a few errands to run before it's time to turn in.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was hilarious.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, we appreciate it.
And some of your comments are fucking great, Jeff. Keep them coming. Keep them going.
You're welcome. All right. See you later, everybody. Good night.
All right.